Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1453 of the War News stream. And we have very big news once again tonight. We've seen Ukraine have struck Moscow several times today with over 100 attack drones, and also across the entire state of Russia. We've also seen that a major Iranian ship was seized by U.S. forces today in the Indian Ocean. And also, another big report, China has been seen from satellite escalating their nuclear weapon production, and it's a huge escalation, actually. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from most areas of the globe, in particular the area of Eastern Europe, the Middle East, East Asia, the eastern part of the Indian Ocean, and most importantly, the eastern part of the Americas. Everything with East. Go East, young man, that's what they say. And we have been able to hear of major news coming out of the Russian Federation as Ukrainian drone forces in the hundreds have penetrated Russian airspace and have caused significant damage throughout a larger part of the Russian Federation, with explosions and drone activity being reported within the Moscow air defense perimeter, a complete energy blackout now gripping Belgrade and Bryansk, with Bryansk's entire power grid being knocked out today, and explosions being reported around the area of Kaluga, Tula, and Ryazan over the course of the night. Not only that, the Russian Federation has also apparently suffered some damage at Ust-Luga port, not from a drone attack, but from a drunk Russian driver, which it appears that one of them apparently rammed an entire oil tanker into the dock at Ust-Luga and may have suffered enough damage that it might have knocked the dock out of operation for a little while. Additionally, the Russian Federation is also shuttering up even further factories throughout the Russian Federation and are laying off even more workers, as the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church have asked people to stop praying for money because the money's run out. So apparently, according to the Russian Orthodox Church, the Lord can't conduct miracles. It's just if the money's out, there's no reason in even praying for it. Outside of that, that, we have also been able to hear that additionally, the People's Republic of China appears to be working at a rapid pace to further increase the nuclear capacity of their nuclear deterrence and nuclear armed forces, as we have seen a large amount of forces and facilities being built up around the People's Republic of China on satellite footage, once again confirming that the Chinese are beginning to rapidly build up the amount of nuclear weapons within their current inventory. It's believed that they're currently conducting this at the moment because it is expected that the People's Republic of China is shifting from a solely national defense nuclear doctrine to a limited deterrence doctrine. As they're preparing their eventual invasion of Taiwan, they want to make sure that they're able to actually threaten the United States with a nuclear exchange over the Taiwan situation, and not over a direct threat to China's national sovereignty and a direct nuclear attack that would threaten China's sovereignty. Additionally, the United States has also seized another Russian tanker within the Indian Ocean today, as U.S. Special Forces did board the vessel and did seize it. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the United States of America is preparing to conduct talks in Switzerland with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it appears that absolutely nobody is under the assumption at this point that these talks will result in anything. The Iranians, under the Foreign Minister Agachi, have already made it clear that they are not going to be talking about the development and research of any sort of missiles whatsoever to the United States of America, and we've also seen that they are generally once again putting their foot down on any sorts of nuclear limitations, including the complete dismantlement of their nuclear industries. Israel is heavily adamant to the United States of America currently that must be a stringent requirement, that old nuclear facilities must be ripped up from the ground up inside of Iran, and Iran must not be allowed to operate any sort of nuclear facilities that can enrich uranium to any degree or produce any weapons-grade plutonium. Outside of that, the U.S. forces inside of Syria, the very last that were left, have withdrawn from Syria today and a base near to the area of the Al-Hasaka government border, and have moved into Iraq, and will be transiting out of Iraq and out of the nation in general, meaning that the nation of Syria will now be completely devoid of U.S. forces effective today. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear of other developments within the area of the Caribbean, as it appears that the U.S. Fleet Auxiliary, which was rammed by the Early Burke just a couple of days ago, is apparently still within operation. They apparently got out a little bit of spackling and some gray paint, covered up the hole, put some paint on it, and it's underway again. The U.S. Navy is truly a message of resilience around the world. We've also been able to hear out of the U.S. government today some fairly interesting developments, that apparently they do believe that the chances of talks succeeding with the Islamic Republic of Iran are wildly slim. Additionally, Ukrainian armed forces have been able to continue to take ground, although the Russians are now claiming that they are taking ground in the very same area that the Ukrainians are pushing the Russians back. And the Russian Ministry of Defense has claimed today that they have now taken the town of Matylivka, which is actually about 7 miles away from the active front, and the front line is only going further south away from Matylivka instead of further north like the Russians are stating it currently is, towards to the area of Zaporizhia. Ukrainian armed forces have been able to inflict significant losses onto the Russian Federation's army over the course of the day, and are generally taking ground in the Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, and also Zaporizhia fronts, and are holding their ground in other areas, still inflicting significantly high losses onto the Russian armed forces in the meantime. We have quite a lot of news to cover tonight, folks, and we are going to be making sure to get through each and every single piece of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down, as tradition is always dictated on the channel, to the smaller stories in the later part of the night. And I gotta say, folks, that today is no day that is short of any major news. And there's actually a little bit of major news that we have to share with you all about the Enforcer channel itself. On this day of February 15th, I, the Enforcer, the one who yaps endlessly on air and basically never stops to breathe, was born on this day 24 years ago. And since then, I have endlessly yapped, exhausting my abilities to speak until my face is turned blue about things, no matter what they are, and no matter how boring and mundane they are. And tonight, I shall continue to carry on my tradition, as always, by yapping to all of y'all about the major developments in the news that has happened today. So with that in mind, everyone, it's time for us to get on into this news. And moving us on into the largest and most significant news that we have today, we are going to be moving on into the Russian Federation, as we were able to hear that another drone swarm has attacked the Russian Federation again tonight, this time one much larger than the last, and it appears that this one had a broader scope in general compared to the prior drone attack that we saw yesterday that attacked the Russian Dawn. According to the information that we have today, Ukrainian drones conducted a 3- or 4-pronged attack, if you want to call it a 4-pronged attack, with 2 prongs heading towards the Moscow area, 1 prong heading as far as Cheboksary and the Chuvash Republic, and another 2 prongs heading into the area around the Volgograd Oblast, and also into the Russian Don at large. These attacks were significant and were comprised of hundreds of Ukrainian long-range drones, and it appears that the damage that was caused overnight has been wildly significant. Moving us primarily into probably one of the most shocking developments of the day, we were able to see that the Moscow air defense perimeter was surprisingly enough actually overrun by the Ukrainian drone attacks that were conducted just a few hours ago, with videos here showing us the Ukrainian drones making their way on towards the air defense perimeter right on the outskirts of the city of Moscow. Here's our first clip. Oh, there it is. It's a Lyudi.
It's just lurking out there. Look at that thing lurking. That was just one of hundreds of them, by the way. That was just one of the little small ones of the massive swarm that came in.
And let's take a look at the rest of these little swarms that were coming on in. Oh, that's air defense fire, possibly. We also were able to see another clip here, letting us hear the drone in all of its glory.
Listen to it, throttling up, throttling down. Are each one of these manually controlled, or are they all AI controlled at this point?
From what we know, they're still manually controlled, I believe.
Interesting. That's a lot of operators. They launched hundreds.
Oh yeah, they got a lot of operators. Actually, funnily enough, the Ukrainian armed forces have such a large amount of specialized drone operators that they actually have an independent Ukrainian drone force branch that solely prioritizes and operates drone forces and all the logistical infrastructure needed to keep them going. So, interesting enough, they probably do have plenty of operators, probably even in the thousands, that are able to operate drones not only inside of Russia, but also on the active front lines as well in reconnaissance roles. But we also saw this clip showing us a little glimpse, like a tiny glimpse of some smoke that was rising from what appears to be an impact site right on the outskirts of Moscow. But I gotta get y'all into the inner Moscow area, because we were able to see, also interestingly as well, that apparently Russian air defense was in a panic around the Moscow area and was firing off air defense missiles quite literally over what appears to be IKEA-style stores towards the inner area of Moscow. This is within the 2nd or 3rd ring road, as they were trying to shoot down the drones that were making it into the air defense perimeter. And from what we know, this was a real button clencher for the Russian air defense, because there was such a large number of these drones that did make it all the way to Moscow that it looked as though it may be overwhelmed, and we're still trying to get information on that at the moment as to whether there was an impact or not within the area. We have seen Ukrainian impacts with their drone forces inside of the Moscow air defense perimeter in times prior, but we haven't been able to document one of those impacts at least yet. And we also were able to see in this clip as well another interesting little look. Oh, that looks to be a couple of Lyudis. Oh, someone just dropped apparently their goods that they were putting in the car. Listen to that. Man, they just dropped the whole...
Someone's scuffling back there. So maybe someone's getting mugged by the drone. They sent out those, the mug ones.
Man, while everyone's looking at the drones, some Gopnik's like, quick, run everyone's pockets. And he's like robbing everyone.
Oh, man, he's getting all like 5 cents of rubles in their pocket.
Man.
Nahуй.
And also the Russian air defense did take down the drone. But still, it is quite an interesting sort of a phenomenon to see that drones made it that far into the Russian air defense perimeter. Funnily enough, these days, Ukrainian drones very rarely ever make it this deep into the Russian air defense perimeter. We believe that these drones that we're watching in the clips were shot down over the areas of Lyubertsy and Podolsk, which are actually well within the Russian air defense perimeter that exists on the outskirts of Moscow. It also seems that there was a larger amount of explosions that were apparently recorded or documented outside of Moscow, as Russian media reports that in the past couple of hours, several explosions have been recorded in both Ryazan, Tula, Aleskin, and Kaluga inside of the Moscow region. A number of drones were recorded over these areas during the day, but we haven't been able to get any video or picture evidence yet in Ryazan, Tula, Aleskin, or Kaluga of direct damage that has been caused by Ukrainian drone impacts that have been conducted within this area. The chances of Ukrainian drones making landfall and successfully hitting targets in any one of these 4 cities is generally a pretty high likelihood. The city of Ryazan has been hammered by Ukrainian drones an endless degree, ever since really 3 years ago, and we've never really seen Russian air defense set up in this area large enough to be able to defend the area from the Ukrainian drone attacks, meaning that this combined power plant and oil refinery complex is basically slammed on a near 24/7 basis. It basically is to no end, and we've seen that endless amounts of damage and monetary loss has been caused by the Ukrainian drone attacks within that area of Ryazan. We have also been able to see that Tula and Kaluga have been hit in the past as well, usually quite easily by Ukrainian drones, which once again leads us to the idea that it's not at all out of the question that the Ukrainian drones were able to successfully hit Kaluga, Tula, and Ryazan. It's just that the video evidence has not come out just yet. But we do have video evidence coming out of cities that were a little bit earlier on in the attack as Ukrainian drones were meandering their way towards Moscow, specifically Bryansk. Bryansk is a fairly large city that is near to the Ukrainian border areas, and as far as strategic significance, Bryansk is a fairly strategically important city near to the Ukrainian border. It is not as important as Rostov-on-Don and Beluga, Belgrade, not Beluga, as far as its strategic importance in terms of its ability to transport supplies and equipment and also operate as a staging base for Russian Federation armed forces, because Bryansk is generally sitting in an area near to the Sumy and Chernihiv oblasts in Ukraine, which have been heavily inactive in prior times, and we generally believe that the Russians are conducting any real frontline actions and having to use a base of operations or a staging city, it would mostly be cursed for the operations that are happening in small form in Sumy, meaning that Bryansk is a fairly important city for size and industrial output, but as far as the actual strategic outlook on the battlefield, it isn't that important. Still, the Ukrainians have decided to make sure to teach Bryansk a little bit of a lesson, at least overnight, and we were able to confirm that a complete blackout is generally starting to sweep over most of Bryansk. This picture actually came out overnight, and Russian officials claimed that more than 170 drones were shot down in the Bryansk region alone. We doubt that. The Russians have a very bad air defense record.
Oh, wow. It looks like there's some lights in the street. Like, it looks like they got some emergency lights on or something. It's bright as hell in the street.
Oh, you mean the car headlights? Yes, emergency
Is that
lights.
Cars?
Yes, these are cars. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought if it looked like people for a second, I was like, what the hell? I was like, these people got some bright emergency lights. It's literally like beacons. But yeah, I guess that would be cars. That's wild, actually. That's like, what is that, like 2 or 3 cars or like a ton of them?
It looks like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or so on that street.
Interesting. I guess on my end, it's much smaller. It's like shrunk down, so it looks a lot different. But yeah, I guess it is cars.
I guess it is cars, I would suppose. You know, emergency lights, highly unlikely in Russia. Emergency preparedness is not their big strong suit. But we did get to hear that following strikes on energy infrastructure, parts of the region, including Bryansk City, which is the one in the picture here, were left without electricity and heating. The attacks are coming amid cross-border strikes after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As we all know, that's been going on for 4 years. Let me show you a little bit more details, though, from the Bryansk area. Let me show you all the substation as it fries in the distance from this dash cam, which was so graciously recorded by a Russian. Whoop to your mind. Not good for them, I will tell you that. And we also got one last clip here, also showing us some more scenes from the Bryansk city area. Let's take a little look. That looks like a complete blackout to me. I don't think we can doubt that at all. We can also see in this next clip as well a little bit more of the darkness that's descended over Bryansk. It looks like this Russian's having a candlelight vigil for the doom that the Russian government has brought amongst them all, and it continues to allow for the Russian Federation's people to largely suffer for the incompetence and stupidity of Putin and his regime. We've also been able to see, as well in this clip, someone's whipped out another candle. Oh, they turned on their flashlight, and a very questionable noise was made right there. Let's listen. I think this girl likes candles a little too much. I think she needs to calm it down a little.
Man, I'll tell you what, getting a little freaky out here.
Man, it's like, oh no, the power's out. Time to turn on the candle. It's like, okay, let's calm down. Like, maybe we don't need a candle. Okay, this girl's a little out of it. But moving on from that, we can also see the complete blackout out there as well. Well, I gotta say, nice to see. Didn't know Russian women were freaky like that. You know how they like candlelight like that badly. Apparently, this is a big thing for Russian women in the region, is that they're finally able to use their candles. A little bit odd to me, but apparently the city is generally without power at the moment, and that video does largely confirm that Bryansk is without power. This will have some significant impacts, not really on the strategic situation in Ukraine, but at least on industrial output within the Bryansk region and also within the Bryansk city area, as Bryansk actually does have a decent amount of industrial concerns that are built up within the area. You can see a couple of these right here, and maybe even right down here as well. You could see many of them, as a matter of fact, including this factory complex as well. They all look like garbage, but they do produce goods that the Russian Federation generally wants to have for the war effort or basic functions, and considering that the electricity is out throughout the entirety of the city, a lot of these industrial buildings will not be able to function a lot like the rest of the city, meaning that they'll be running into a little bit of a problem. A bit of a problem, actually, I'd have to say. But a lot of people are also wondering, why in the world did the Ukrainians conduct such a massive attack on Moscow, and also other major cities like Ryazan, Tula, Kaluga, Alexin, Bryansk, also Belgrade got hit again tonight. We haven't made it to that yet. And even the cities of Timruk and Anapa, near to the area of the Kerch Strait, have also been hit as well. We'll be getting to those here in a little bit, in a moment. But a lot of people are wondering about that Moscow attack in particular, and the fact that the Ukrainians seem to have really been going for Moscow today. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now that we've seen today that hundreds of drones were launched at Moscow specifically and the entire region of Moscow, what is Ukraine's new objective with this strike? Because we of course see Moscow getting attacked, a decent bit of frequency, but this was a pretty large attack, and I would say this one stands out today quite a bit. So 35% said the goal was to intimidate the Moscow elite and the government, while 32% said the goal was to strike power targets and critical infrastructure, and only 27% said it was to hit military targets in the area. So I think that this right here was basically a step up the escalation ladder for Ukraine, because Russia will not stop hitting basically the power infrastructure inside of Ukraine. And not only that, but Russia has been unfairly targeting Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. And generally speaking, Ukraine has refrained from striking into Moscow. So the way I see this is Ukraine is leveling the playing field a bit. They're starting to actually launch attacks on the Russian capital city, which of course will make things a little bit more fair, because previously Ukraine has limited their power infrastructure attacks to the border regions, for example, Belgrade, Kursk, etc. But this one is a little bit different. It's targeting the elite inside of Moscow. So I'm with the 35%. I think it is to basically intimidate the Moscow elite and get the government to basically feel the wrath of the Ukrainian government. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that generally I would believe, in my opinion, that this is most likely to try and strike critical targets within the Moscow area, because the Ukrainians have conducted attacks against Moscow in the past, and so an intimidation factor really isn't there. Intimidation is only really there the first few times, but after a couple of times of attempted attacks or successful attacks on Moscow, the intimidation tactic has well been secured and generally worn out at that point. So I'd have to say that they're probably going for some sort of targets and critical infrastructure within the area, because Moscow does house around 11 to 12% of the country's population within the singular metropolitan area. So I would generally say that that's probably what they were going for. There are a heavy amount of factories and key infrastructure within the area that could have been hit, but we do not know, at least for now, yet, what exactly they've hit. But nevertheless, we will hopefully get some information on that tomorrow, because we do have some further information, at least at the moment, out of the rest of the Russian cities that were generally hit last night. Moving us on down and into the area of Belgrade, we were able to see that there were more explosions that happened in Belgrade again last night. Everybody knows that Zelensky is out there going, the Russians, they need to learn a lesson. Bomb Belgrade again. And so they did bomb it again. And we could see that in this security camera that was largely blurred out.
Always the car alarm.
It's always the car alarm. Ooh!
I've heard they're developing a new sport in Ukraine. They're calling it Belgrade bashing. It's a whole league.
It's like cow tipping, but better.
More cowbell.
More cowbell, indeed. Also, speaking of which, let's get some more cowbell in here. Ooh, attack that. And this sounds like Chirac.
It sounds like hell. Honestly, if I lived in Belgrade, I think I'd probably go somewhere else at this point. But the unfortunate part is for the folks that are probably stuck in Belgrade is they're stuck there because they probably don't have the money to leave. So they really don't have a choice. They're going to have to endure it, and maybe eventually, maybe they'll say, enough, Putin, stop attacking Ukraine, so that way we don't get blasted anymore.
Man, I gotta say, hopefully we'll see that maybe the Russians will make the right kind of decisions to see that they don't get blasted like this all the time. And that's also a little file from one of the impacts in Belgrade. And we also got a little clip here of a Ukrainian airstrike, but this isn't really related because that's not directly within Belgrade. We also were able to see this large fire that broke out in Belgrade for a brief moment there. From what we believe, this was maybe a HIMARS strike that happened within the area. And it seems to have caused even further damage to the already knocked out power grid, from what we know, because we've heard that this general explosion site was near to an electrical substation. So it's cooking. Definitely. I mean, you look at that kind of a picture, it's really hard to say that it ain't cooking. But moving on out of the Belgrade area and on out of the city of Belgrade, it is also time for us folks to get on into one last little piece of news about the strikes that happened overnight. We were able to hear that as well, the area of Temryuk port and also Yurovka, getting on closer down to the town of Anapa, were also hit by Ukrainian drone attacks tonight. We haven't gotten any video evidence yet of the oil depots on fire again at Temryuk, but we're expecting to get those here soon. It does appear that the Russians have had a lot of damage caused to their country overnight, but we all know, folks, that the Russians, according to their propaganda, they are very devout Eastern Orthodox Christians, and so we do know that many of them will pray for money and better days and, things to get better. Well, that only apparently goes so far in Russia, apparently, because we've now heard, according to the Russian patriarch, heaven is not responding. I don't know what that means. Like, it's a
Man, I'll tell you what, you got the other quote, by the way, the one that actually showed the picture of the guy and it had the actual quote from him, by the way. We have that on our Twitter page. Let me go grab that real quick.
Yeah, go grab that real quick.
Yeah, I got the one with the picture next to it. This guy was going off today. I tell you what, the patriarch, he was letting loose. He wasn't holding back. He was saying exactly how it is. I just put on the likes tab, by the way. Go grab this one real quick and let the people hear this.
Oh man, here he is right here, looking like a. I'm not gonna lie, folks. This is a little bit silly looking. He looks like one of those versions of Santa that you buy at the store, for Christmas decorations. But beyond that, according to Patriarch Kirill, who is the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, he has stated that Russians shouldn't pray for higher wages and improved material well-being. Heaven doesn't answer such requests. So,
it's funny though. It's I thought that was the whole point of praying. I thought the whole point of praying was to improve your situation. That was the hope. It sounds to me like he's basically saying, stop demanding that Putin fix your situation. That's what it sounds like to me.
Man, he said, heaven broke, out for lunch. What do you mean? What do you got to say? Man, I got to say, this is a little bit of something ridiculous. And also, one thing that I got to say, folks, that's a little bit funny here, is that this guy right here, which for some reason to me, let me go pull him up. Let's see. Let's see. Ballad of Buster. Hold up, folks. Bugs. Last act. Hold up. Let me go get this, folks. I gotta go get this. For some reason, I don't know why, but this guy reminds me of this actor right here on the right with the beard. He looks like that, basically. And this guy who basically looks like some other actor that I've seen here in the West, who, mind you all, is a former member of the KGB and the FSB, who then happened to just be given the position of Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church by Putin himself, is the one telling everyone now that Russia's basically run out of money, not to pray for money, because the banks are out of money. So I gotta say, a little bit convenient with the timing on that one, with the fact that the Russian economy is actually collapsing right now. And now's the time that apparently the heaven doesn't answer such requests about money or higher wages or maybe a better standard of living. It's a little bit interesting how that happened just today. I also got to say, folks, as far as the get up of the Russian Orthodox Church, I mean, could you make it any more blinged out than this? I thought the whole thing, I just got to say really quickly, not getting into religion here, but the whole thing about Christianity, for the larger part, at least Protestant Christianity, is modestness or modesty is the best way to explain it. And nothing about this looks modest. This is like the most gaudy thing I've ever seen. This is like if one of those like social media wealth influencers like Alpha Chads tried to lead a church. This is what they would dress up like right here. Like there's so many pearls and so much gold and silver on this guy that if you took all the clothes off of him, you went and sold him in a pawn shop, you would come out a multimillionaire just from the jewels on the clothes alone.
Yeah, really. This guy, he's really blinged out, honestly. But you got to respect the audacity of a statement like this. You have to really respect it. Also, by the way, it's been said for a long time. People allege that this Russian Orthodox Church is highly connected with the Russian government, which generally appears to be like it could most likely be the case. I mean, this statement from this guy here, it sounds to me like he's running interference with the Russian government. It sounds very clearly like what he's trying to do with that statement. So, I mean, basically, it's a way to keep the people under control. It's like basically what he's saying is stop demanding Putin fix your problems and shut the hell up. That's basically what he's telling people, which is kind of crazy coming from a priest.
Well, you know what's even crazier about this is that the Russian Orthodox Church is generally it's generally a Russian institution, like a government institution. To explain why that's the case, way back in the day, at the beginning of the Soviet Union's inception, at the end of the Russian Civil War in 1922, Lenin completely outlawed all religion, and it basically became that if you were not an atheist, you were going to be discriminated against by the Russian government. It didn't matter who you were, whether you were a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, or anyone, you were going to be discriminated against if you openly professed any form of religion. So, when Stalin came into power after Lenin died, Stalin realized that that really wasn't going all too well, the whole deal of just basically outlawing religion, because religion was persisting nonetheless. So what Stalin did is that he actually had it codified that the Russian Orthodox Church was to become an integral institution of the Soviet Union's governmental system. And not only that, Stalin elected himself the head patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. And since then, throughout the entirety of the Soviet Union's history, the Russian Orthodox Church has been a directly connected part of the Russian government in the Soviet Union. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it pretty much remained completely intact, that the Russian government had absolute control over the Russian Orthodox Church. That is why the Russian Orthodox Church, about a couple of months into the war in Ukraine, was banned inside of Ukraine, because the Russian Orthodox Church was actually being used as a basically a conduit by the Russian government to coordinate and speak with Russian sympathizers in Ukraine, to conduct acts of sabotage, and to try and gather intelligence and information to relay back to Russia about Ukrainian military activities, movements, and their current condition. And that's something that is led to the banning of the Russian Orthodox Church inside of Ukraine. So this church basically is not a church. It's more so a government propaganda institution that is disguised as a religion and as a church, but it's basically just the Russian government's mouthpiece taking a pseudo-religious form.
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like, and I've been saying this, and so has Andrew for a few days now. It seems like the Russians are pulling out literally all the stops to try to get the citizens pacified as much as possible. They're trying to monitor all their messages by getting the armed forces on this new messaging app that the Russians can monitor. They're bringing out the patriarch to tell people to calm down. They're also starting to censor, for example, cemeteries of the fallen Russian soldiers. We'll get to that in just a second. They're doing a lot of stuff, which seems to be PR damage control, basically, which seems like there might be some rumblings. In fact, I'm becoming very certain that there must be some rumblings inside of Russia that's causing Putin and his government to get very worried for them to be pulling out all these stops like this all at the same time in such a short period of time.
Also, I do have to point out the irony of this, Matthew. This guy's like, do not pray for money. There's no more money. As this guy dresses up in the most blinged out. I mean, this makes pimps envious how blinged out this outfit is, and the entire wall behind him is plated in gold. And he's like, don't pray for money. It's like, are you kidding me, man? It's like, have you seen where you're at and what you're dressed like? It's like, that's just insulting
really.
at this point, you know? But outside of that, we've also been able to hear that there's a good reason why he's telling everyone not to pray for higher wages and a better standard of living. Companies are folding in Russia, kind of like a folding lawn chair does in America in the summer, which is quite a lot. We have now been able to hear that the Russian car company that produced this very Bentley-looking car, the RS Sonat, which was actually given to Kim Jong-un on an official state visit, I think back in 2023, has actually folded today, and the company has completely shut down and has fired basically all of their staff. Now, the technical terming for this, and I'll make sure to read you all the title here, the RS plant in Yelabuga has been shut down, and workers have been sent on downtime, which is the Russian way of saying they've been fired because the company has shut down. But I like that. That's like the British way of saying, I've been made redundant, which means that you've been fired. The Russians go, we're sending you all on downtime. It's not downtime, you're being fired. The business has gone under.
Yeah, really. Also, by the way, you know, the funny thing is, even though he gifted one of these things right here, basically this Aurus sedan is basically the Russian version of a Rolls Royce, or it's their take on a Rolls Royce, basically, that they tried to mimic. And you can kind of tell it looks a little bit similar. It seems like every country on the planet tries to mimic Rolls Royce in one way or another. The Chinese also do it as well with their own Hanqi brand as well. And it looks similar, and its goal is to be the ultimate luxury sedan. He gave one to Kim Jong-un, like the enforcer mentioned, but I rarely ever see Kim Jong using that. Like I think he still uses that Mercedes Guard actually to get around in. I don't think he really uses this much. I think he's only been seen in it like a handful of times.
Dude, you know what's gonna be even worse, man, is when his bodyguard detachment in North Korea is like, it looks like there's a little issue with the suspension here. We better call the warranty department. Boop, boop. This phone number you're trying to reach is no longer available. Huh? It's like, what do you mean? Like, it's
So much for getting people to work on it. Really, it's probably gonna be a tough job.
Man, and now, folks, now Kim Jong-un's been left with a lemon. You can't even send this thing to the warranty department to have repairs conducted on it. Now, that's something right there. But Russian companies appear to be folding quite badly, quite frequently for that matter. And we've also been able to hear, folks, I didn't include this one today on our markers on the map because we had a lot of them, and I was trying to cut down on how many we had. But there are some very interesting little artifacts that are popping up on Russian websites when you try and look at satellite photography of specific areas of Russia. And primarily, and let me see if I can go and grab this really quickly from our Twitter page, because it should be easy for me to spot. Is that Russian cemeteries appear to be getting blurred out on Russian satellite views on Google, well, their equivalent of Google Maps inside of Russia. It's believed at the moment that they're starting to do this sort of in action because the cemeteries are beginning to become so filled so rapidly over the years that they really can't allow for people to know how bad it's getting. Here's an actual example here from the Yandex map system showing this cemetery right here just south of Ilinskaya, Surkov, being blurred out on the map, much like it's some sort of a military facility. And to quickly show y'all here, this is what that cemetery looked like in August of 2022. Notice that there's only about 2 full rows of graves and headstones in this newly made cemetery in this area. This is what it looks like now, and it's almost at 65% capacity over just the next 3 years, meaning that this cemetery is filling up about as quickly as reservations are filling up for the new Ocean Gate submersible, which seems to be indicating to us that the Russians are trying to hide as much as they can about the amount of casualties and fatalities, more so, that the Russian army is taking inside of Ukraine. And a lot of people are wondering, why are the Russians doing that? Is it to lie to the public? Like they can't just drive out there to the cemetery and literally see it themselves? Is it to try and hide the losses from U.S. intelligence, which isn't happening because the U.S. Army doesn't use the Yandex? So, we use Google and military satellites, so it would be really hard for them to try and hide this from the U.S., so that'd be a very vain attempt. Or are they trying to just respect the fallen? And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so why do you think Russia's currently doing this? They're blurring out the cemeteries, and obviously, I think the cemeteries have had a lot of new additions in the recent months. The losses are getting crazy. So, why is Russia doing it? 61% said to prevent Russian public outrage, while 31% said to hide losses from U.S. intelligence, and 3% said just to respect the fallen. And I can pretty much promise you it's not to respect the fallen. That's pretty much something that I can be very, very certain about. I think you can be too. But I'm with the 62%. It's mainly to prevent the Russian public outrage because they do not want the Russian civilians to get on their public map system, go to the cemeteries on the satellite view, and see that the cemetery is growing like this, as you can see right here in this image. They don't want people to see that because it's literally definitive proof that the Russian government is lying to the people and they're losing people in huge numbers years. And the Russians are lying to the mothers and fathers of the sons that are being lost over and over and over. So this is all, like I mentioned, is seeming to be a PR cleanup crisis for the Russian Federation. They're trying to hide everything from the public because the public might be wising up to just how bad this is going, and they might be getting close to the end of their rope when it comes to this whole situation. So I'm with a 62%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd agree with 62%. It's definitely to try and prevent public outrage. Because as far as going to these cemeteries, you really can't stop people from going to these cemeteries and taking a look at them in person. But one thing that would be really bad, at least for Russians' sake at this point, is for social media influencers in Russia, a lot like us, to go and look at these cemeteries on Yandex Maps, which is basically the only maps that they currently have access to in Russia, and then just snapshot something like this and be like, look at the cemeteries filling up, look how many people are dying in this war. Because then it makes it a lot easier for people to start showing that this is an ongoing trend across the whole country. And this is something that we've actually even done on the channel as well, primarily with a single cemetery at Ryazan, because the cemetery that we always talk about, folks, is right outside of this oil refinery right here. It's right over here. Here's one of them. This is the Old Town Cemetery, and these up here are the New Town cemeteries. And back in the day, this cemetery right here was the only one. Let's see, it's called the Belgorodskoye Cemetery. And the southern part of the complex down here, it didn't exist. And this little area over here didn't exist as well. Since the beginning of the war in 2022, this part of the cemetery was expanded and then completely filled in with graves. And then this cemetery over here as well was also expanded, and it's now filling up with graves so quickly, they're going to have to expand it to its complete size and probably fill the entire thing in here within the next few months in the amount of dead alone. You can actually see that a lot of these plots are so new that grass hasn't even started to grow over them by the time the satellite footage is being made. Once again, giving you all an idea of how many losses that they're taking and the fact that this is happening in every single city across the Russian Federation. So I would say that this is definitely to prevent public outrage, because I think if Russians were able to easily see on a map and then share that on social media how rapidly these cemeteries have been filling up over the years, that's probably going to start causing a lot of outrage, which is probably already starting to bubble up inside of Russia at this point due to the fact that they've completely banned Telegram and WhatsApp to try and force everyone on the messenger match so that way they can surveil their messages and make sure that they can put down any dissent before it becomes a big issue. So with that in mind, I hope that does address that the best I can. But in the meantime, folks, we do have to point out something else that's a little bit big. And I mean big literally, up in Ust-Luga, at this giant port today, a Russian appears to have been a little drunk at the wheel, and he has crashed the ship into the port. He's crashed Tony into port. Let's take a look.
Tony, I love it. Tony's back, and he's back better and bigger than ever.
Tony, please! Man, I wish we had that clip. Oh, look at Tony. Tony's about to do some damage.
Tony's coming in hot. Oh, look at him.
Oh. Oh.
He's hungry for the crane.
He yearns for the crane.
Oh, no. Tony, yeah. Oh, come on now. Tony. Like you're smashing the crane up. Russia can't afford losses like these. They can't get replacement parts. Come on, Tony. Damn it.
Boy.
Sugar, блядь, you bastard.
Oh, my Lord. Tony be messing up a multi-million-dollar crane. Oh.
Man, you know they're hurting. You know they're hurting right here because Ust-Luga is like one of their few remaining ports that's like fully operational, and they don't have to worry about too many attacks on Ust-Luga. They can still get attacked by Ukraine, but it's not as often. And now one of their offloading cranes have been completely damaged, so this is going to be a bit problematic.
It certainly is going to be problematic. That is without a doubt. But with that, it is time for us to move on from that little clip. And it's time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have outside of Russia. But before we do want to say that there is one more thing that the Russian government did say today, and this one was a little bit interesting. There are negotiations coming up again between Ukraine and Russia on the 17th and 18th of February. And we all know that peace will finally be achieved in those talks because, it's been a year and 2 months now, and they've always been getting closer to peace in every talk. This time around, though, the Russians have prefaced the talks by making the claim that Russian citizens will live on bread and water and are ready to lose millions to try and win this war. Now, I'd have to say, folks, knowing how us modern Americans live, I don't think a lot of people will want to live on bread and water alone and also lose millions of their fellow countrymen to win a war that at this point seems hopeless. But the Russians are generally saying that, which seems to be torpedoing the next talks and also making it kind of a little clear that the Russian government has absolutely no intention of wanting to stop this war anytime soon at all. I mean, forcing your citizens and openly saying that you're going to force your citizens to eat bread and water at a bare minimum to make sure that millions more of them die to win this war that clearly is not going to be won at this point. That's kind of giving us an idea that the Russian government is pretty dedicated to keeping this thing going. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that statement? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so the Russian delegates today made this crazy statement in the midst of trying to negotiate with the West to end the Ukraine war. They basically said something to the effect of, many of you may die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. That's essentially what they said today, and it's absolute insanity because I'm sure the Russian people said, hey, wait a minute, hold up, what? We're not ready to live on bread and water, and we're also not ready to lose millions. So the Russian government is speaking on behalf of the people that are actually going to be dying. The Russian government won't be dying, it's going to be the people. So they're basically saying, we're willing to sacrifice all these peasants' lives over here, but we'll be good. We'll sit back and watch this take place. So I'm sure the citizens don't really like the sound of that. So what are your thoughts? Is Russia serious? 52% said Russia is 100% serious about this, while 32% said Russia is 100% bluffing the West, and 11% said Russia will change their mind very soon. And unfortunately for the Russians, unfortunately for Ukraine and the West, the Russian government is actually dead serious about this. I truly take them at their word on this one statement here. Everything they've done so far is indicative that they're willing to throw their entire country down the drain to make sure they don't lose this war in Ukraine. And mainly, it's because of Putin's ego, because there's no real legitimate reason that you would go further and further into this unless it was about ego. Because, I mean, the Russian economy's dying, they've transitioned almost completely to a war economy, and the people are suffering, and the interest rates are sky high in Russia. Literally, everything sucks. Like, nothing in Russia is in good shape because of the war. So, why would you continue it? It's not like taking Ukraine is like, a paramount to Russia's success. In fact, it's going to be their doom if they keep this up. So it's stupidity, but they are serious. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say I think the Russians are actually serious about this. As I show y'all these appetizing pictures of these measly slices of bread and a cup of water, it looks like an appetizing meal to me. And I would have to say that the Russians are definitely serious about this because throughout the entirety of the conflict so far, they made it incredibly clear they're willing to go to any length, including the destruction of the Russian nation, to try and achieve a victory in this war. So I would believe that they're actually legitimately serious on this, and that's why they're saying it. Because one thing that we'll have to say, folks, is that there has been a surprising amount of resilience in the U.S. administration to keep pushing for talks when it's clear that the Russians don't want to keep talks going. And I think that the Russians making this statement today is once again clearly showing, I mean, it's not even alluding or trying to hint at it. It's literally obviously saying they don't want to engage in peace talks. They want to achieve unconditional victory in Ukraine, and they're not going to stop at anything less than that. So don't even engage us in talks because you're wasting our time and we're getting tired of running laps around negotiators by pissing on their heads and then having them come back for us to do it again. I think that they're even getting tired of trying to keep up the pretense that they even would be willing to talk about ending the war. This is quite clear by these statements. They'll keep the war going to any end, to any degree, to any length, with any losses, to be able to try and eventually secure some form of a victory. They cannot achieve a victory, however. It's not going to be possible, and there's a million reasons that that is the case, but take me at face value, folks, for now, because it would take about an hour to explain all of the different reasons why they are guaranteed going to lose this, but I'll just boil it down to this. For everyone who says that Russia is still winning this war, if you are an invading nation and you invade a country and 4 years later you still have not successfully capitulated that country and made them accept an unconditional surrender, and the front lines have basically not moved in 3 years, you are losing that war. There's no other way to put that. There's no other way that the Russians will be able to win the war, because they've absolutely gone all out to try and already win it, and they still haven't won it. That would be like saying Imperial Germany, and let me show y'all this, actually. I want to show y'all this. This is interesting. Let's see. Western Front, Western Front. Let me put 1918 in here to show y'all this. So, if I was to show y'all where the front was in 1918 or so, this is actually where the German front was at the end of the war. Right around here, this red line that existed right here, this was the farthest German advance, but at the latter part of the war, we were able to see that the Germans were still holding massive amounts of ground in France. Even in 1918, that was literally the last months of the war, they were still holding ground. Here's the 100 Days Offensive. Look at all of that ground in northern France that they were holding at that point, and all of the ground even towards Alsace-Lorraine that they were holding as well. They were holding a significant amount of France's territory, and people back then, off of that perspective, with a very two-dimensional understanding of how wars are fought, could have said, well, if the Allies are winning the war, then why does Germany still hold large parts of France? It's an absolutely stupid sort of an analysis, because it's completely forgetting that in the background, there was the Spartacus uprising that happened in Bavaria. There were multiple military coups and also uprisings that were happening inside the German army, inside of Germany, and near to the front. The German army was literally living off of boiled cabbage because there was nothing left to eat in most of Germany. They were starving to death. They had completely run out of resources. All those things considered, people still could have gone with World War I, oh, the Germans are clearly winning because they're still holding parts of France. And that's just not how wars are fought. You can lose a war and still hold land inside of another country. Russia can lose the war right now in Ukraine while still holding 20% of Ukraine, just like Imperial Germany held about 15% of France's territory until the very end, literally the final 2 months of the war. So with that in mind, I'd have to say, you know, it doesn't really seem to me that the Russians, no matter how far they push this thing, will really ever be able to gain a victory, because they haven't gained a victory yet, and this war has lasted longer than the Soviet Union's involvement in the Second World War. They're not going to be winning anytime at all. It doesn't matter how long they keep this thing going and how many people die, they're never going to win it. But with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can, and it is time for us, folks, to move on out of that news and on into something else, something a little big. China. Oh, we got some news coming out of China today. We got a lot of it, actually. Well, not a lot of it, but it's a fairly big development. In that sense, it is a lot of news. We were able to see that satellite photography has now emerged out of the People's Republic of China. And I have to say this, folks. I'm so sorry to that Air Force colonel who is angry about the randos on Twitter. Because the randos on Twitter, we do get access to like satellite footage and ADS-B transponders. We're very sorry about that. But outside of that, though, we did get to see that the Chinese are rapidly expanding their nuclear facilities. Quite a lot of them, as a matter of fact. We can see these same nuclear facilities in 2024 and 2026 and clearly note that there has been significant buildups of facilities here within this area. We can see that there are larger facilities with earth bunkers in 2026 at new areas that have been constructed at the facility, and larger areas of construction that are happening on the northern perimeter of this specific facility. I believe, if I'm correct, this one is let's see, it is the Zaitun Valley facility, or the Sichuan's Zaitun Valley facility, which has had a large amount of constructions conducted at it. We also were able to see here near the area of Ping Tong, or as I like to call it, Ping Pong. There has been a large amount of additional facilities under construction, and we've also been able to see that there is a clear sign, folks, that this is affiliated with Chinese Communist Party activities. Xi's slogan is prominently displayed above the entrance to the factory. So every day you walk in...
What's it say?
What's up, Beijing?
Oh. What's up, Beijing? Is anybody ready for a coup?
Man, is anybody ready for the PLA to overthrow me? But we can also see here, additionally as well, this facility at the Zaitong nuclear site, also under construction in the past, and in 2026, it appears to be fully up and operational. It has been completely constructed at this point and appears to be online. We can also see in this last picture here the entirety of the nuclear facility from start to finish within the Sichuan province. I'm sorry, everyone. I forgot it's Sichuan. And let me see here if I can show y'all exactly where this is in the People's Republic of China. Let's see here. That's Ping Tong. So if we go here and we go up here, so it's somewhere within these mountains. Let's see if we can find exactly where it is. Let's see. Maybe we can find it here. Oh? This is looking close, but it's not looking...
Mounting party propaganda on the walls of this government building, or whatever this is in the picture. Look at this. That's Mao. Look at that. That's the spirit of Mao Zedong. He is back once again. The great leap backwards.
I'm sorry, everyone. I forgot. It's our moment to increase our social credit score. Long live Xi Jinping. Long live the Chinese Communist Party. Long live Mao. Oh man. All right, there we go. I just completely averted, Matthew, our social credit loss with all of the other statements that we just made, dogging on them. We just got all of our social credit back. It's a little bit of it, at least. But anyways, all jokes aside, that's actually kind of crazy that they have Cultural Revolution posters in front of what I'm guessing is the local party headquarters. Like, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. That is crazy, honestly. The propaganda is really like it's out of date. Like that's bad out of date. I don't think that works on anybody anymore.
Yeah, I don't really think it does. And it also doesn't work when everyone's driving Hondas and Mercedes like, that are made in Japan and Germany. You know, it's like really hard to sell the propaganda thing. But beyond that, though, sadly, I cannot find out exactly where the nuclear facility is, but I'm guessing that's probably closer to this mountain range out here in the Sichuan province of China. It is around Chengdu, though. We do know that. So a lot of people are talking about this nuclear facility, and I can actually tell you all a little bit as to why this is this large construction and development is going on. The Chinese are trying to rapidly ramp up their nuclear weapons production because they are trying to get towards a shift in nuclear doctrine. Currently, China's nuclear arsenal is actually somewhat small for their national size and is generally entirely leaned towards protecting themselves from a nuclear attack. It really doesn't have any deterrence in terms of, like, if a conventional war goes bad, they threaten to nuke you. They actually don't have a nuclear doctrine like that. Their nuclear doctrine currently exists around the idea of they will never use nukes unless if someone fires a nuclear weapon at them, and then if they see that nuclear weapon flying at them, then they fire theirs back in return. That's literally the only way that their nuclear doctrine exists and operates. The Chinese are trying to move that towards a limited deterrence, which means that China is wanting to move it a little bit more into the category of the following. If the Chinese try and invade Taiwan and the US gets involved militarily in defending Taiwan, if the U.S. starts beating China too badly, China could say that it poses an existential threat to the People's Republic of China and our inalienable sovereignty of the island of Taiwan. For that reason, we're going to threaten nuclear weapons against the United States for that purpose. And that requires them to have a larger and broader variety of weapons, including a larger amount of tactical nuclear weapons that could be used in a battlefield scenario and an even larger number of ICBMs and IRBMs to be able to threaten American allies within the region and to also threaten the United States more heavily with a direct nuclear barrage. So that's currently what we're understanding a lot of this buildup is about at the moment. And a lot of people are talking about what the United States should do to respond. And Matthew, what are people thinking that the United States of America, the Grand Republic, should do in response to this blatant Chinese aggression and buildup of nuclear weapons?
Also, by the way, while I'm addressing this poll real quick, can you pull up that picture of the party again that we just looked at while I'm doing this if you can? But anyways, real quick though, to address the poll, the satellite images are showing that China is rapidly expanding its nuclear weapons programs, which also comes on the heels of the revelation that the U.S. just revealed about a week ago that China's been conducting nuclear tests underground, and they've been using a special technique to hide it from the seismographs that the U.S. uses to detect that nuclear testing. So how should the U.S. respond? 33% said the USA should do their own little nuclear tests, perhaps somewhere, maybe, possibly. 32% said nothing really can be done about this. And 25% said the USA should give China an ultimatum. So out of all this, I would say, typically I'm not a fan of nuclear testing. I'll be honest. Nuclear weapons should be tamped down as much as possible. But in the face of such blatant violations by China, it might be necessary to prove that ours do work. And of course, we do have some superior firepower at the helm. It may be necessary because it looks like China is getting a little bit out of hand with this thing right here. But also, by the way, before the enforcer addresses that, I just wanted to point out that is a Mercedes-Benz that you see parked in front of the Mao Zedong propaganda building right here. So as Chairman Mao always said, comrade, whip that Benz, cop that Rolex, stack those bands, and long live the CCP. But enforcer, what say you?
Man, I always heard that Mao Zedong said, I'm laying out the 5-year plan because Blood's got to grab that bag. man, I always remember that as a real claim by Mao. You know, in the middle of him saying things like "Wei ren min fu wu," which means serve the people, and also "Zhanghua gongcheng dangwang sui," things like that. He was also saying, "Get that bag, boy," and it appears that they're getting that bag. I got to say, party officials seem to be, kind of driving that Benz. That doesn't really seem. Doesn't really seem like communist to me.
How dare them park a Benz in front of Mao Zedong's very endearing gaze from the poster? How dare them do this? This is capitalism. These sicko capitalists parking their Benzes in front of the Mao Zedong building. How dare them?
Man, I love how these party officials, man, they are in that building right now talking about we need to increase the values of the party and we need to encourage communist ideals as they whip up in a Benz. It's like the complete irony of what China is these days. They are so heavily into this communist crap, but nothing that they do is communist economically. None of it is, like, anymore at least. Like, it's like, you can't be a party official driving a Benz and then say that you believe in Marxist-Leninism or Maoism. I mean, there's no way to do that. It's literally it's literally flying in the face of that whole ideology. And then also someone said there's a Honda Civic. Hey, look, that's a junior party member. He's working on his way to getting a Benz. Right now in the party headquarters, that top party official that's got the Benz, he's like, if you if you simp real hard and you simp real long for the CCP, you too can live the capitalist dream. It's like, wow, man, it's like, that's crazy. I would say, folks, that there really isn't a lot that the United States can do because China is a recognized nuclear power and they are allowed to have nuclear weaponry. And generally, I don't believe that at the moment we have any sort of a treaty that limits China on developing and growing their nuclear arsenal into larger numbers. So technically, there really isn't a lot that we can do. And I'm not really a big fan of restarting nuclear tests. We know our nuclear weapons work. We don't have to conduct tests as a show of force to the world that they do work. Everyone knows that they work, and we know that as well. I would say probably the best thing in this sort of a situation, folks, would probably be to go and try and create something along the lines of a START treaty with China to where we generally agree with them that we'll keep our nuclear arsenal at a certain limit and they'll keep their arsenal at a certain limit. Theirs will clearly be a lot smaller than ours, but we'll be able to generally create a balance in the situation and not create a new nuclear arms race, because new nuclear arms races are not really that ideal, because if a war does break out, the chances of nuclear weaponry being used might be even higher. And we don't want to try and increase the chances that a nuclear exchange is going to happen, even at a small level. We want to try and make it to where nuclear exchanges are the least likely thing to happen. So maybe some version of a START treaty with China might be our best foot forward in this sort of a situation.
I don't know. Like, typically speaking, I would be with you on that because I am very much against nuclear proliferation, nuclear testing, nuclear development, pretty much anything involving nuclear weapons. I think most people with any kind of logic understand that it's not wise to push the envelope with something that deadly. But in this case, though, when you have the world has become also, by the way, folks, like this has been addressed by analysts for the past few days or so. The old world order has truly changed. That's not just a catchphrase. It has changed. It used to be rules-based. As recent as just a couple of months ago, it used to be rules-based. In the modern day, as of this week and today, it's become basically the battle of the fittest. Whichever country projects the most might and strength, they're the ones that are going to be basically the world global leader. So that's a dangerous environment, by the way. That's extremely dangerous. I really hate it's come to that point, and some really bad policy decisions have brought us to that point. But we're here now, so no reason to complain about it. We're already here. So to deal with it, you got to be very strong. You have to show strength, even if it means escalating with things like nuclear weapons. You have to show strength. So a nuclear test, in my opinion, would not be that bad compared to the alternative. Because if you don't show strength in this environment, you're going to get rolled over. I think that China has proven that right now, that they are doing stupid things by testing nukes and also building up their nuclear production. And that has to be met with force.
But they haven't tested a nuclear weapon yet. Like, they fired off a
They tested underground.
Well, that is true, but then again, we pulled up the yield, though, and it was incredibly small. I mean, like, it was wildly small. But I mean, technically, that is a violation of the testing treaty. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter what the size is. You know, actually, man, I didn't think about that earlier when I was talking about that. Now that you bring that up, yeah, I actually say that we probably need to meet this with aggression, because the Chinese are clearly violating about every nuclear treaty that we have right now, like on testing bans that they are an active signer of. And apparently that's what Zhang Yuzhao, I would assume, gave us this information, is that they are conducting nuclear tests, and that might be the key nuclear secrets that the Chinese said that he gave to the United States. So I would say that we probably do need to react a little bit more openly and aggressively. Now, thinking of that, I completely forgotten that that was the case. But I think that we should be reacting aggressively then, because if the Chinese are conducting nuclear testing, which we generally believe that they are at this point, then trying to get them to work off of a concept of international treaty probably wouldn't work too well, like I was just suggesting a second ago. So I got to say, a good point right there, Matthew. I had completely forgotten about that, and that does change the analysis quite a good bit. But moving on out of China, it is time for us to move on into the middle of the East. But before we get on into the middle of the East, folks, I do have to say that we are massively appreciative to everyone who's been watching so far tonight. We have a peak viewership of 13.5 thousand people, which is quite a lot of people. And we've had 82,000 people watch the stream in the first hour and 10 minutes. And I got to say that we're always greatly appreciative and wonderfully, profoundly thankful for all of y'all enjoying these streams. And I hope that our Sunday night fundraiser has been going well. And Matthew, how well has that been going? And who are our top donors?
So believe it or not, I just realized something. We have been negligent tonight. I don't think we mentioned the fundraiser at the start of the stream, actually. But did we mention it, by the way?
I don't know. I don't know, actually.
I don't think we mentioned. I think we mentioned it actually. But I've been plugging it in the chat though. But it's actually already up to almost $1,800 raised, and we haven't even called the thing out. So a huge shout out to everybody, by the way, for throwing in that massive donations tonight to help get the fundraiser up to that point. Once again, tonight's fundraiser is for Razom for Ukraine, a really good charity that we fundraised for many times in the past, and they do really good work inside of Ukraine. So we're currently sitting at just shy of 1,800 raised, which is fantastic, and our goal tonight is 2,500. So a huge shout out to the LSA for literally doing that on your own accord, because we literally didn't even shout it out at the beginning, which I don't even know how we forgot to do that, but that's one of the few times we've actually forgotten, but it's still gone crazy anyway, because the LSA is just good like that. They pull through anyway, even if we don't shout it out. But anyways, though, we want to call out some of the top donors.
Sorry, I had to check really quick. You said 2,900. I was like, wait a minute, did I put in an extra 400 on the goal? I was like, okay, it's 2,500. I was like, oh, thank God. But who are the top donors?
So jumping into our list of top donors here, this one goes to Ella MC Wills Nafo, who put in the largest one of the night so far, a $200 donation, and a huge shout out to Ella Nafo for that support. Also, we had a 100 from Hal Rose, as well as a 100 from James Hughes, along with ARP Bob, as well as a 50 from Old Warrior and Mace Star Citizen, as well as a 50 from A Squared. And then we had a 50 from Sadata Hosada, as well as a 50 from Howard Mendelson, and a 50 from Cliff H. And a huge shout out to all of our top donors thus far. Those are the top donors as of right now. And also, if you happen to throw in one anonymous and it didn't put your name with it and he wants to shout you out, let us know and we will add it to the spreadsheet. But in the meantime, though, we are just about $600 or so shy of the goal. So getting very close indeed. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to say a humongous congratulations to everyone who's been supporting this fundraiser, like Espen Turgenhausen, who just threw in 1,000 Norwegian kroner. Holy!
That's $100 support right there. Look at that.
Holy moly! We're probably getting really close to the $2.5 thousand goal. I'd assume we're maybe 500 assumping. But I gotta say, it's a huge congrats to everyone who has been supporting the fundraiser tonight. It is absolutely wonderful to know that we were able to raise a humongous amount of support for a fundraiser on my birthday. Hey, I turned 24 today. Isn't that great? That's wonderful here. And I gotta thank you all so much for supporting this fundraiser tonight. We thank you millions, and we hope that we're able to see that this fundraiser is able to hit here soon the fundraising goal of $2.5 thousand. And so a humongous thanks to everyone who has supported the fundraiser tonight, whether we were able to call out your name or not. Each and every one of y'all is making a humongous contribution to these fundraisers, and we always are massively appreciative of that, and thank y'all greatly for continuing to keep the Ukrainian people within your hearts and minds and helping them out through these nonprofits and the fundraisers that we run every Sunday. So a huge thanks to y'all once again. And that's right, John, I'm 24. You've been getting your news from a 24-year-old. Sometimes, age doesn't mean competency, because I've seen a lot of people out there who are in their 50s who really do badly, and us in our 20s, not to, toot our own whistle here, but I think we do pretty all right at what we do. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into our questions, and I'm sure that we have quite a many of them. And we're going to be making sure at the moment, though, to limit it down to just 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have out of the middle of the East, the Indian Ocean, the Eastern Caribbean, the one piece of news we had there, and then the actual war in Ukraine. So, Matthew, what is our first question of this segment?
All right. So the first one goes to Paul Schultz, who said, what is stopping China threatening nukes if the U.S. gets involved in trying to defend Taiwan?
Currently, their nuclear doctrine doesn't really support that sort of an action, and also generally their nuclear array doesn't really support that action either, because most of their nuclear weapons are strategic in scale and they don't really have any tactical nuclear weapons. And for actual deterrence purposes, you actually want to have a bit of an escalatory ladder. Even in nuclear weapons, you want to have an escalatory ladder, and the Chinese don't actually have that at the moment. So what the Chinese nuclear response would look like in every scenario is that they just fire off a massive ICBM volley at Russia or us, because originally they built their nuclear arsenal to actually counter the Soviets. And now in the modern day, it's generally to counter us. So if they wanted to threaten us over Taiwan, they would have to immediately go to a complete strategic nuclear exchange, which they might end up losing because they don't have as many nuclear warheads even at the strategic level that we have. And while we could literally waylace to the entirety of China and ensure that they would never resurge after a nuclear attack, their nuclear arsenal will be large enough to largely lay waste to the United States, but over time, decades, we could probably recover. So China actually would need to develop nuclear weapons that are of smaller sizes, tactical size nuclear weapons, that they would be able to use on a battlefield or at sea against the U.S. Navy. So that way, if they were to try and threaten that sort of an action in a Taiwan situation, instead of going, we are going to nuke the mainland of the United States if you don't stop, they're able to go, we're going to start dropping tactical nukes on the U.S. Navy or the U.S. Expeditionary Forces that are on Taiwan. And then that allows for escalatory steps to be made afterwards to where if the U.S. doesn't listen, then they can work up the ladder from there. But generally at the moment right now, with how the Chinese nuclear arsenal is generally constructed and how it operates, they really wouldn't be able to threaten a nuclear exchange over Taiwan because they don't have the proper sort of nuclear array to be able to do that properly. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I gotta say a huge shout out to Nicholas Condor, who just made
Damn.
250. Holy moly!
Oh, what in the hell is going on? We're only guess what? Only about $300 away from the $2,500 goal right now. It's crazy.
Holy moly! We might actually hit that while we're in the middle of this question segment. And also, speaking of which, I hope I was able to answer that question well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the second question of this segment.
And also, by the way, a huge shout out to Nicholas Condor for that massive support right there to the fundraiser. Also, by the way, I'm going to do something that I rarely ever do. I'm going to take the second question here of the live chat questions for myself because I'm selfish. Not really, but but I do have something to show y'all real quick that will consume the second live chat question here. And Enforcer, go to the Twitter page real quick and take a look. I want to show people our local Air Force base here in Salt Lake City. There was something very historic that happened today, by the way. Utah got delivery. Wait a second. Hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on. Did we hit the goal? Wait a minute. Hold on. Whoa. Hold on. Is it going to update? Is it going to update? Come on. So why is it not updating? It said, I just saw ARP Bob just put in a 200. Oh, it's a super chat. Oh my God. Thank you very much, ARP Bob, for that super chat. Man, why does I keep hearing my voice over and over? It's confusing the hell out of me.
Hearing your voice over and over.
I heard my voice replay.
There was nothing going on my. Are you're going crazy, man? Crazy. I'm just kidding. It was actually I was trying to load up the fundraiser myself to go see it. But what were you about to say about this clip, Matthew? What were you about to say about it?
But I was about to say, also, by the way, huge shout out to ARP Bob for that super chat, by the way. We do appreciate it. And we'll get to that here shortly. But this is very historic, by the way. At Hill Air Force Base here in Utah, those mountains in the background, by the way, are the snow on the mountains actually in Salt Lake City right now, which is pretty nice sight. They landed a next-generation nuclear reactor on that plane that you're looking at right there. It came in from California. They delivered it to Utah. It's a new type of reactor that I believe is a mobile reactor. There's pictures of it attached underneath this video right here. If you go take a look at the post underneath it, you can see that there's the reactor inside of this cargo aircraft right here. So this is supposedly a new deal. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand what they're going to be using the reactor for. I guess it's going to be maybe used in a war zone, possibly. I'm not really sure, to be honest. But it is historic. I just wanted to show you all that. Thought that was pretty cool footage.
What it's going to be used for is to power military facilities here and abroad. So we're going to put this in a war zone. Yeah. Yeah. But we're also going to be putting these at military bases as well and other key locations. I will say, folks, I'm a huge proponent of nuclear power. I think it's the future of energy production. So I think that it is really cool that they have produced a portable nuclear reactor that actually can be transported via a C-17. That is really cool. And it's really neat to know that this thing showed up at Hill Air Force Base today. I did see this, and I wasn't going to mention this, folks, because I was like, that is really cool, but I don't really think it falls within what a lot of people want to hear for news. But it is really neat. This thing has been in development for years, by the way. This thing has been in development for a really long time. But they finally got one up and running, and now they're able to transport it around like this one. Sadly, I saw someone that is a fusion reactor. It's definitely not. This is a fission reactor. Fusion technology hasn't taken off like that yet. So it's a fission reactor, but it's one that is small enough that it can actually be transported around. So you can actually use this thing as a mobile generator that is able to generate a absorbently large amount of power, and it doesn't really require a whole bunch of raw materials, say like tons of oil being shipped in, or tons of coal, or tons of another form of a resource to be able to operate this thing. So I gotta say, this is the coolest thing that I've seen in a little bit, and it's really neat to know that this thing showed up on my birthday. What a neat birthday present they gave to me.
We've hit the goal! Hey, chugga chugga eagle! We've hit the goal. It's been smashed. Look at that. It's been smashed. I tell you what. Look at that thing right there. It's currently at exactly $2,500 raised. Old Warrior Fellow was the one that brought us right to the goal with that 70. He literally rounded it right off at that nice clean number right there, which I must say pleases the brain quite well to see that nice round figure right there with 0 cents at the very end of it. I like that a lot. A huge shout out to Old Warrior, by the way, for that massive support that just came into the fundraiser. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a humongous congrats to everyone for hitting that fundraiser goal. It's really cool to see. $2,500 raised out of $2,500 goals. I gotta say, a truly incredible and amazing thing, and I gotta give y'all a humongous congrats to all of y'all in the Lee Spring Army, the big donors and the small, for helping to make this fundraiser a reality tonight once again, because the Lee Spring Army has always shown that it will never truly die, and that the Lee Spring Army has lived an incredibly long amount of time. It's getting on over 4 years at this point, which is really crazy. So with that, a humongous congrats to all of y'all so much once again. And Matthew, are there any other comments that you would like to add to this portable nuclear reactor?
I'm seeing people say, it looks like a lot of more people in the chat are more experts in this topic than I am. I just saw this today and thought it was pretty cool. I hadn't done a whole bunch of research into it. The only question I have about this right here, which sadly we won't be able to get the answer to on stream, is what type of safeguards is there for this type of technology? Because the obvious concern is, number one, if we assume it's not going to a war zone and it's simply going to power like, remote facilities for the military in a non-war zone setting, then that's okay. But there's still risk to it even with that, because it's obviously a nuclear reactor, so you're moving one around portable like it's like a mobile battery, which is a little bit fascinating, a little bit of an interesting concept. But if you put it in a war zone, that seems like a disaster in the making. I'm not really sure how they're planning to protect it like that. It seems kind of strange. But I guess for the fact that they're able to shrink it down to that small size, that's impressive on its face. As long as they're responsible with it, it seems pretty safe.
So, I've actually heard, Matthew, interestingly enough, this is, I believe, the War 250 reactor, and let me see if I can read up a little bit of information on this thing. Once it's on the ground in Utah, it will be moved to the Pony Express Trail near to Tooele in Tooele County for extensive testing. That's
no,
pretty.
It won't.
I'm just kidding with you.
This thing's going down to like the middle of the state or something like that. It's going down to some like range or something down there.
Yeah, so this is the first of 317s, C-17s that'll be bringing in the components. And let's see here. Let's see. So it's going to be used at remote bases and airfields that are set up overseas. So it's going to be used primarily in war zones.
Yeah, that's an interesting use case for a nuclear reactor like that. I'll be honest with you. Do I have faith that they're going to safeguard this thing properly? I'm not totally convinced about that. I'll be honest. I'm not trying to bash the military or anything like that, but it seems like, I mean, we already have accidents with like stationary nuclear reactors. There's already accidents that take place with that, and we've seen mismanagement before. Now we're going to up the stakes probably by tenfold with a mobile version of it, and also put it in an area where naturally there's explosions happening around it because it's a war zone. So it seems like a strange concept here. We'll have to see how it works out.
Also, I gotta say, I don't really know how I feel about this, but them unloading Connex boxes that say graphite on them, it makes me feel like Chernobyl's coming around,
I wish I could have been up there for this and like be able to photograph it myself and like do like an interview or something. That'd have been pretty cool. I didn't know it was coming in today.
Yeah, we didn't know it was coming in today because we were actually down at the Pony Express Trail. That's why I name dropped that a minute ago. We were around there today, and we drove all the way down there, and then all the way up to the Salt Lake. And then we drove past the smelters and all the sulfuric acid that they had sitting out in the open out there. And then we drove back down to where we're at and all that. So I didn't know that this was coming in today. Pretty interesting, though, that it did happen today on the 15th of February, which is my birthday. That's crazy.
Also, by the way, why'd they blur out the tail number on this thing? It's not like it's a secret or something.
Oh, well, that little colonel in the Air Force will throw a hissy fit. I mean, God forbid the ADS-B transponders turned on in commercial airspace.
Can y'all believe that, folks? I'm not sure if y'all saw that statement today. Sadly, we can't show the videos. I think it's copyrighted. But there was I believe it was an Air Force colonel. This woman in the Air Force was making a point that apparently for the Twitter randos, as she called them, and I'm not sure if we can show that, by the way, but the Twitter randos, as she called them, were posting, like, for example, public information about the ADS-B data for military flights going around the world. And she was complaining and sounding very irritated about how they're basically publishing stuff that she personally believes, in her personal opinion, should be something that's classified. But the problem is, though, it's called OSINT, open source intelligence. It's been done for decades, and it's all public. Like that, I mean, you can literally pull up Flight Radar 24 and see the active movement of military aircraft. They have to turn on the transponder because they can't run into a commercial aircraft, so they can't turn it off. So the U.S. Air Force is broadcasting for the entire world to see, including OSINT analysts like us. And then she's going to complain about the fact that we actually look at it and we comment on it. It's like, what the hell kind of stupid stuff is that? And on top of that, not only that, if she's complaining about OSINT, is she not aware of the capabilities of our enemies? Our enemies have capabilities 10 times greater than OSINT. Like, OSINT is just good for us in the public. They don't have clearances. Like, it's good for us because it's all public. For the enemies, they have their own satellites. They have way more effective methods of tracking stuff than mere OSINT on Twitter. I mean, that's crazy.
According to the Federal Rules of Aviation issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, which was heavily advised by the National Transportation Safety Board, military aircraft flying through U.S. airspace and generally most civilian airspace outside of a wartime scenario must have their ADS-B transponders on and must actively be squawking their positions on the transponder. This means that anybody who is able to pick up an ADS-B transponder will know where those aircraft are in U.S. airspace. This is also a publicly accessible website, Flight Radar 24, and you can get all of this data without Flight Radar 24 Gold. Gold just removes the ads. Literally anybody in the world can see this right now. As a matter of fact, we even knew that the Venezuelans were using this to watch U.S. military air activity before Maduro was nabbed, because in one of the pictures they took of a control room, they had Flight Radar 24 up on screen. These aircraft are required to keep their transponders on because if they don't, let me show you what this really looks like. They could run into any of those civilian aviation aircraft that are currently in U.S. skies. So they have to have the transponder on because they have to contact ground in all of these locations and be vectored through sometimes to make sure that they're not colliding with civilian airliners and killing hundreds of people all over the place all the time. The reason why they have to do that is because, I believe in the past, if I'm not mistaken, the military way back in the day, I mean like way back in the day, did not have ADS-B transponders on in civilian airspace, and I think they ended up getting into an aviation accident where an F-4 Phantom ran into a commercial airliner and literally chopped it in half because the wing sliced right through it, which led to the death of everyone on board the civilian airliner. And then afterwards, it's been required, especially within U.S. airspace, that their transponders have to be on. So it's not a secret. They turn off their transponders when they're over the Atlantic, like right here. If we followed that flight, it will eventually turn off its transponder once it makes it out of Canadian airspace, and then it will turn it back on when it gets close to Ireland. So in international waters, they don't have to keep the transponder on because they're flying on a general air corridor, and then they can kind of keep themselves a little bit more low-key. But if they're over anyone's national airspace, the transponder's on and everybody knows they're there. There's no OPSEC violation of that at all. If they think that's an OPSEC violation, they ought to threaten the safety of all the flying public and turn the transponders off and hope to God no one runs into them.
Yeah, and also by the way, it's like what's up with the disrespect? Like Twitter rando. It's like you could tell she was clearly expressing some anger behind that statement. Like it was intended to be jaded at the people like OSINT analysts. It's like why? It's like well, what the hell are you like bitching at people for simply looking at the ADSB data and putting it in a spreadsheet? It's like it's public. It's like you don't think the enemies are doing that? It's like come on, they're not even having to do that. They have systems that are automated that track those flights. They don't have to manually input it into a spreadsheet. So I mean, it's silly. By the way, like it's really silly. And also, it's like apparently the randos are on your radar because you're apparently talking about them and looking at them. And also, why was your boss, your Secretary of War, why was he on Twitter looking at the randos accounts? Like the first thing he did when Venezuela was getting hit is he was typing furiously. He was on there. He was looking up. He was typing in the search word Venezuela on Twitter, looking at the randos accounts that she's bitching about.
And I don't mean to throw any shade at the military, but I'd like it if they wouldn't sit there and throw around that much disrespect when it was a couple of Army aviators that ended up causing a crash with the Air Eagle flight at Reagan International Airport and ended up killing about 80 or so people because they had their transponder on and even still they couldn't visually identify incoming traffic and they ended up running headlong into them. Like I feel like if they're going to throw around disrespect, maybe they ought to understand the reason why the transponder's on is so that way they don't end up killing hundreds of people in U.S. airspace. That's why they're easily visible and easily identified. And additionally, even with their transponders on, sometimes their pilots aren't even well trained enough to visually identify local air traffic to not run into them. Because also, by the way, before anyone starts to talk a little bit further about the Reagan incident, back at the Reagan incident, that Black Hawk had its transponder on, just to make that clear, and was in contact with the tower at Reagan International Airport. The tower had openly stated there is an Air Eagle flight coming in on, I believe it was runway, it was this runway, if I'm not mistaken, and they need to make sure that they had visual separation. And the Black Hawk pilot came back and said, "Yep, we have visual. We'll keep visual separation." And they didn't have visual, and they didn't keep separation, and that's why that little regional ran right into them and ended up getting everyone killed, is because they weren't even paying attention even with their transponder on. So it's like, maybe they ought to not throw around that much disrespect, considering that this is for the safety of the general flying public, and that's why we can easily see what it is. But anyways, enough of that rabbit hole. I just find comments like that quite uneducated, considering that this is coming from someone who's supposedly a major in the Air Force. But anyways, moving on from that, very neat to see the nuclear reactor around. And with that, folks, we're on to the final question of this segment, and then it's time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have from around the world.
And our last one here goes to GC, who said, have the Russians reestablished any type of comms since the Starlink and Telegram went out?
Generally, from what we know, not really. They're trying to get some internet back in some areas, but the internet connections that they're trying to work with are getting blown away by the Ukrainians pretty often now. So generally, the answer is no. In some areas, sporadically, they sometimes have internet connection and some access to larger communications if they have Messenger Max, but outside of that, communications are generally still non-existent along most of the Russian front currently. So with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have from around the world. Moving us on into CENTCOM's area of responsibility, we have been able to hear over the course of the day that it appears that the foreign minister Arachi is already heading to Switzerland on the Iranian Dassault Falcon 900EX. So they're going to be going to Geneva to go talk to the United States here in a couple of days. We've already been able to hear that this will not be promising because they have rejected any talks on missiles, and apparently they're also rejecting talks on completely dismantling their nuclear program. We've now heard that the U.S. is saying that there's probably not going to be any success in these talks, which is the news that we have out of Washington today, is that a lot of U.S. officials are believing that the chances of a second round of attacks, well, a second round of talks being successful is very slim. And the Israelis also seem to be in a general consensus on that as well, as the Israelis did mention today that they didn't want the United States to even negotiate with Iran on a partial dismantlement. They wanted a complete dismantlement of all Iranian nuclear infrastructure, not stopping at the enrichment process. So it appears that that will also be a huge crux of the issue as well, because Why the hell will we ever allow Iran to maintain any level of uranium enrichment inside their country, considering that they cannot be trusted, and the Iranians will never agree to completely stopping uranium enrichment? We've also been able to hear that the U.S. is already considering the possibility of strikes or failed talks on Iran so highly likely that they're already moving on into preparing for strikes. And according to what we've heard, the President of the United States told Mr. Yahoo in December that he would back Israeli strikes on Iran's ballistic missile program if no U.S.-Iran deal is reached, according to sources that spoke to CBS. 2 months later, CBS News has learned that internal discussions between senior figures in the U.S. military and intelligence communities have started to contemplate the possibility of supporting a fresh round of Israeli strikes on Iran. American deliberations have focused less on whether Israel could act than on how the United States might assist, including the provision of aerial refueling for Israeli aircraft and the delicate matter of securing overflight permission from countries along the potential route, according to 2 U.S. officials who were knowledgeable of the matter. We've already seen that the Israelis are trying to get some of their air arm ready to operate, and for one of the first times ever, we saw that an Israeli aerial tanker with a transponder on flew over over Syria, over the As-Sawaida Governorate just south of Damascus, and then flew back to its airbase inside of Israel, which appears, from what I could tell, to generally be around the Nevatim Air Base area. This is actually a Boeing 707 tanker, not a KC-135, and let me see if I can actually show you all one of these here. Let's see, a 707-300. Let me see if I can find this for y'all. It's loading, and here we go. This is the fairly rare Israeli aerial tanker that we were looking at. This is not a KC-135, by the way. This is legitimately a Boeing 707 that was converted into an aerial tanker. So that's a pretty interesting fact about this aircraft. Nothing really further than that. It's just a rare example of an aerial tanker. But it did operate openly over Syria today, and it appears that it flew then back to Israel after conducting its operation successfully. We've now heard that the Iranians, though, while they're, generally not wanting to get into talks, are getting a little bit of an offer of assistance. But before we get on into that, I do want to make sure that we talk about this breaking news that just came out. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the Twitter randos, we're back in motion again. We've gotten some more information that the Air Force may be pissed off about. We're seeing that another major airlift, it appears to be, from what I'm gathering here, it appears to be Stratotankers, also KC-46 Pegasus. They are heading out from bases across the United States tonight. It's a pretty big deployment, it appears like, of refueling tankers heading across the Atlantic towards Europe and most likely to the Middle East. So we are seeing these leaving right now. And it looks like the Twitter randos are back at it again. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh no! Oh god! It's over! It's so over! But beyond that, I'd say that it appears quite obvious that there's another major airlift going on at the moment. Mostly tankers. It appears to be a blend of KC-46 and KC-135 tankers that are currently flying on over to UCOM's area of responsibility. So we will be waiting to see what we get out of that in general. Oh, what's this? That looks like a C-17 taking out of Maine. And it looks like it's going north, really, towards Greenland. Are we about it? I'm just kidding. We're actually probably sending that to Patufik. But this also appears to be another flight that's heading over to CENTCOM as well, the C-17. Also, our flights returning from the Middle East, just to make sure that us as randos, we're not violating OPSEC or anything. I just want to give you the clearest picture. We can also see that there is a C-17 that is taken off out of Al Udeid and is apparently flying back with absolutely no info on it whatsoever. We can also see another C-17 flying in, another C-17 flying out. That looks to be Turkish. It is Turkish. We can also see a British Voyager up right now near Akatori. And we can also see a couple of other C-17s flying out of Bitburg and Spangdahlem, or Ramstein, that are currently making their way into the Middle East as well at the moment. So quite a large amount of air activity still going on. So we will have to wait and see. And right now I've heard, folks, that Major's face has just turned more red. Oh, there they are! But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out.
Excuse me, Major. We have more information here, Major.
Major, your country has abandoned you. The ADS-B transponders are on over in a national airspace. But it's like, oh God,
Oh, we have a bingo.
God forbid if we know where they are while they're flying over the United States and Europe, because we all know that Iran's going to clearly whip out an AIM-92 Stinger in the middle of Kentucky and try and take a pot shot at one of them.
Man.
Clearly, I mean, like, obviously.
Oh man, could you imagine if that major found out about Flight Radar 24? Oh my God, like the migraine headache. I'll tell you what, geez, Flight Radar 24 would be a crisis for that major. I'm sure they'd freak out.
I think we would hear, Matthew, there would probably be an obituary put out that they died of like an aneurysm after seeing Flight Radar 24, because I think that's far beyond their knowledge. You would think that they kind of know about that, though. You would also think that considering they're in the Air Force, they'd at least know a minimum of FAA regulations about having your transponder on while in civilian airspace, which they're in. It blows me away. It baffles me, truly. But anyways, moving on out of that, though, it is time for us to get back to the Middle East, because we do have something big that came out of Afghanistan today. The Taliban are offering their assistance to the Iranians if the U.S. strikes them. The Taliban knows a lot. They know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two, because they, too, have gone to war with the United States. Not really much to their chagrin, like they got kind of beat, pretty badly until we left, and I want to make sure that I caveat that with until we left, and then they kind of just sweeped the weak government that we left behind. But we kind of beat them around a good bit, even inside of their own country. But they were offering assistance to the Iranians because apparently this time around they think that screaming in the mountains and firing an RPG at some Humvee here and there is really going to help out Iran this time. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now that the Taliban has spoken up, the Taliban, of course, the ones who are now the quote-unquote legitimate government of Afghanistan, which is still a bit baffling to a lot of people, is this a serious threat of concern now that they're offering to defend Iran against the United States' upcoming attacks? 67% said no, the Taliban will get smashed. 22% said yes, this could be a big issue, and 7% said I'm 50-50 on this one. So the only downside is the Taliban have all of our old equipment they left behind in Afghanistan. So they do have a decent arsenal, but their guys are pitifully trained. I will say, they kind of whooped our ass a little bit. That's why ultimately Afghanistan fell back to the Taliban, because we were not able to defeat them for the most part. But at the same time, though, we put up a damn good fight. So I think ultimately the Taliban will get smashed. And also, I really doubt the Taliban are coming to the aid of Iran. Like, that's going to be a big step for them to take. They're basically stepping in the middle of two warring parties or fighting parties and basically taking the punches for Iran. I'm not sure if the Taliban are that generous. I would have to wait to see that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they didn't really give us a beating because, a lot of people always say that the 2,400 U.S. soldiers that were killed in Afghanistan is a beating. But when we consider that we are assuming, and we don't really know even how many of them were killed, but at a minimum, 52,893 to 80,000 Taliban insurgents were killed outright over the course of the entire conflict, generally mostly by U.S. and British forces, and really more so the U.S. from about... It was roughly, I believe, 2010 onwards, because I believe the British generally withdrew out of Kandahar after 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me, folks, if I'm wrong. But I would say that is such a large ratio in our favor that it was really more so that they were able to just wait us out, more so than ever actually beat us. Because it's not really like the Revolutionary War where the kill to loss ratio is very similar. It's almost a 1-to-1. It was more so maneuver that one where the British were truly beaten in that war. This was more so the U.S. was wiping out the Taliban left and right compared to what they were able to inflict on U.S. forces until political willpower in the U.S. was lost, and then we just basically left and then just conceded because we weren't willing to sit there for another 10 years and keep grinding them down. So I would say that I don't really think they're going to be helping out all too much. And I saw some people say, well, I don't know. I mean, the Taliban are a big threat. Oh, come on, folks. I mean, they were a big threat as far as putting, IEDs covered in copper on the side of the road where a Humvee would drive by. But I mean, that's a very different thing than trying to shoot down an F-15 over Iran. I mean, it's not like they have that ability.
They did have that Black Hawk they tried to fly.
Man, that ain't doing nothing. Like, that ain't doing nothing.
You remember that, by the way. You remember they tried to fly that thing and it ended up in a real bad disaster for the Taliban. It turns out it kind of ended in a bit of a kaplunk boosh.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it didn't really turn out too well,
Let me see here. Taliban Let me see if I got the video. Let's see if we can show this real quick. Let's see if we can show the prowess. Let's see here. Oh man, let's see here. I gotta have this thing in here somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, come on, come on. I've got to have it in here. Hold on a second. Give me just a second. I think this is it. I think this is it right here. Let's see. Yep. I got it. I got it right here. I just reposted it. It's back from October 22nd, 2024. Let's go ahead and show this little thing right here.
Oh no, I remember.
Oh,
Look at him go. He's already lost the rotor. The rear rotor.
damn. Yeah, Taliban.
Allah Akbar! Let's get it.
It's auto rotating. Look at it. Look at it go.
Oh my god. Ooh, oh, they lost it.
Black Hawk down. Black Hawk down. Oh my god, there went the propeller. Oh no. Damn. Also, by the way, the guy trying to fly it was a Taliban truck driver, by the way, so he had zero piloting experience. That's what happens right here. Black Hawk down.
Also, I like how this guy right here is apparently pointing this M16 right at his chin the whole video, really flagging himself there. Good job, like, buddy, not knowing. Like, you see, folks, this is the kind of little things here that really tells you that they wouldn't pose a threat is that, you know, and also this.
Man, you gotta be room temperature IQ, man, to like go jump in a helicopter with zero training. Oh my god, there it is!
Oh!
Look at it! Oh my god! Holy cow! I never saw the second view before. That's crazy. I've never seen this part at all.
I've never seen that either. Like, bro, that was a...
Do that again. Holy... Oh!
Bro, it disassembled itself like Legos. Like, it hit the ground and literally went flying all over the place.
Damn, I tell you, I never saw that part. That's crazy right there. I'm trying to process that one. That angle right there was the best one of them all.
Man, I'm not gonna lie. That's crazy right there. That is insane. But this is why, folks, I'm saying that they're not really going to be posing a threat. And I see some people saying, well, yeah, but what about the U.S. equipment left behind? Oh, come on, everyone. Like, they didn't leave behind the whole U.S. military. Like, they didn't leave behind a couple of F-15s and the Patriot air defense system and stuff like that. They didn't leave any of that behind. They left a whole bunch of Humvees, MRAPs, some small arms, some artillery pieces, some ammunition. It was in the billions. It looks like a lot, but in reality, that billions doesn't really amount up to much of anything. Let me go get y'all a list of U.S. equipment left behind in Afghanistan. Let's see here. So, we left behind, just to get you an idea here, 22,000 Humvees, 42,000 trucks, and nearly 1,000 MRAPs. So that basically makes up the whole monetary value of what we left behind. Around 167 aircraft, including Black Hawk helicopters, attack helicopters, and planes. Most were disabled, and also others were captured, but clearly without any spare parts. They're no longer operational. We left about 358,000 assault rifles, 60,000 machine guns, about 126,000 pistols, and 25,000 grenade launchers. And then we left behind a couple of nods and maybe some radios. So, not really anything that's going to be, you know, giving us a run for our money in, say, you know, bombing Iran. It's not like the Taliban's going to come out with a THAAD battery or a hypersonic missile or something that we left behind because we didn't and fire that at us because they don't even have them. So, you know, like, oh, God forbid, we're going to see Abu Hassan and his 40 Thieves come up on some Humvees with some M16s, but you can kind of deal with that easily with a JDAM or, you know, any form of an airstrike for that matter. So I don't really think the Taliban's going to be helping out all too much. They generally get crushed. But anyways, and also I see someone saying that's a lot, bro. So you're saying, like, I gotta ask you. So as long as we have a big number of anything to you, that would pose a threat. So if we give, like, let's say if we give the LSA 100,000 Honda CRVs, does that mean the LSA poses a threat to the U.S. military? I want to know your answer on that, because if that's a lot, and it just matters that the quantity of something is a lot, then 60,000 Honda CRVs, according to you, would be a threat to the U.S. military, even if they're literally just cars without guns or anything. Because a lot of those Humvees don't have guns. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on out of that bit of info and on down into southeastern Iran, as we were able to see that the Balochistanis are pledging continued resistance. And it appears they have a wide hodgepodge of equipment, including some AKs that appear to have been beat to hell, and some M16s, which also appear to have been beat to hell.
نام خدایی که دفاع از مردم مظلوم را برای ما فرض قرار داده است. ما جبهه مبارزین مردمی با مردممان عهد بسته ایم تا که انتقام خون عزیزانمان که به دست این رژیم ظالم مظلومانه به دست رسید.
Things. He's generally just saying that they're going to continue their armed resistance against the Iranian government, but the Balochistanis say that every day, so, you know, it doesn't really mean all too much, but it was an interesting video that did come out. We also were able to get some additional info out of the area of Tehran, but specifically, we have been able to hear that there is apparently a little bit of shouting that's still going on in the windows in Tehran about death to Khomeini and return of Reza Pahlavi.
Man, it sounds like hell out there. Jeez.
Kind of does. And then we also got to see that later, the besieged started to come around and take photos of the buildings, apparently just to have them leveled later, I guess. I don't really know. But there's a little besieged dude. He's like, I heard some shouting around here. I'm going to have to take a picture of the building now. I don't really get what the point of that is, but... Well, it appears that there's some intimidation going on down in the streets of Iran, and people are still not really happy with the Iranian regime, but it also doesn't appear that a lot of people are going to be trying to risk to go outside to be able to try and do anything about it anymore. It does appear that a lot of people are talking about another big development that happened today down here in the Indian Ocean. But before we get to that, I do want to make sure to touch on this. The USS Abraham Lincoln was spotted today on a Sentinel-2 satellite picture that was put out. It appears to still be within the area of the Arabian Sea. And we also saw that way down in the eastern part of the Indian Ocean, the U.S. Department of War, or the Secretary of Defense, or Department of Defense, whichever way you want to call it, seized the tanker, the Veronica 3. They have been chasing it all the way from Venezuela. It made it literally around the world into the Indian Ocean, and then they finally seized it. Here's the video. There they go.
Now that's how you fly a Black Hawk.
See, this comes with experience and training.
Oh, look, they gave up back there. They're in a nice formation.
Oh, look at that. And then they go on board. Getting to work.
Oh, hey, fellas. Do you mind if we take this ship?
Man, he comes up there. Hey, this is, the United States, let's see, this is the, wait, hang on, let me think of how you say it. This is the United States Police. Do you have your, driver's license and proof of insurance? It's like, man, I tell you. But this is how you, pilot a Seahawk, folks, or a Black Hawk, if you want to call it that. That's how you do it right there. That's a pro. The Taliban are not pros. Remember,
man, you gotta be gentle with the stick, the collective. It's called the collective in the helicopter, right?
I think the collective adjusts the pitch and therefore like the lift of the helicopter's rotors, but I think you still operate it with a joystick.
Okay, yeah, you got to be gentle with it, okay? Like, you know, like a little tap. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't just grab the thing and like toss it to the left, toss it to the right. That's how you end up, you know, going down like the Taliban.
Let me see this. Cockpit. Let me go pull this up because I'm pretty sure that that's how it operates. I might be wrong. Okay, no, that is how it operates. So let me close that video down so that way I can actually pop this up as a window. So there's the collective right there, and then there's the joystick. So I think the collective controls like the amount of thrust that is given to the propeller blades and also their pitch, so that way it can rise vertically or descend vertically. But it's the joysticks that actually make sure that you can actually get it going forwards, like tilt the helicopter forward so that way it starts moving forwards, tilt it backwards to go backwards or to stop, and then left and right and all that.
Yeah, also, I'm seeing everybody say that the cyclical is the one that controls the left to right, front back movement. The collector is the one that controls the power of the thing, apparently.
You know, I got to be honest with y'all. Helicopters are really foreign to me. Like how they actually operate, like how to actually control them. Because aircraft are pretty straightforward. You just generally have like throttles, speed brakes, and a joystick. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into navigation and everything. But those are the basics that you would need to know to fly an aircraft. But with a helicopter, it's fairly different. So you know, pretty interesting with that. But anyways, it does appear that the U.S. did seize the vessel, and this was what was stated by the Department of War. We defend the homeland forward. Distance does not protect you. Overnight, U.S. forces conducted a right of visit, maritime interdiction, and boarding of the Veronica 3 without incident in the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility. The vessel tried to defy the president's quarantine, hoping to slip away. We tracked it from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean, closed the distance, and shut it down. No other nation has the reach, endurance, or will to do this. International waters are not sanctuary. By land, air, or sea, we will find you and deliver justice. The Department of War will deny illicit actors and their proxies freedom of movement in the maritime domain. Department of War! But beyond that, a lot of people are wondering if the Iranians are really going to care about this a whole lot. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so is Iran going to retaliate now? Because, of course, this is allegedly another Iran-linked ship. So Iran's been, yapping up a storm. They've been over there like the Tasmanian devil, like stirring up dust and stuff like that. So what are they going to do? 43% said Iran really won't care that much. They'll just kind of be like, meh, whatever. 27% said it'll end negotiations at least. And 19% said, yes, Iran will act quickly and they'll do something, likely in the Hormuz Strait or something of that nature. And I have a feeling that the negotiations are already over. And I think both parties kind of know that. So I think the Iranian president is simply taking a vacation to Switzerland. He's using it as a good excuse to go, get a nice, refreshing vacation inside of Switzerland before the hell breaks loose. So negotiations are pointless. Pretty much everybody's saying that. The Iranians are saying it. The U.S. is saying it. It's over. So whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Iran's not going to react to this whole tanker situation because they're about to have to react to their country getting bombarded. So I'm with the 43%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll be with 43% as well, largely for those very same reasons. And so moving us on from that, we also were able to hear within northern Syria today that the last of the U.S. forces in Syria have left today. The final U.S. military convoy departed Syria's al-Shadadi base in southern Hasaka province early Sunday, marking the complete withdrawal of American forces from the strategic site, according to the Syrian Interior Minister. We can see this video here showing their departure, meaning that U.S. forces are now completely devoid inside of Syria of existing.
This is very serious.
Very serious indeed. We'll have to see how that generally develops as time passes. But with that, folks, it's time for us to move on down into the Caribbean for a brief little update that the fleet auxiliary that was rammed by the other Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is actually still operating. Here's a picture of it going back out to sea. Look at that. That is actually crazy. This thing took a direct hit. You can actually see the scratches on the paint right there from the Arleigh Burke. And that's when, you all watched the clip of these guys who were up here on the main superstructure, and the Arleigh Burke ended up sliding into them. And then you heard that guy in the intercom go, we've been hit, port! And that was that incident. So this ship is still running. It just took a little bit of superficial damage up on the upper part of the hull, but it's still running, and it's going right back out to sea. So I guess they'll send this thing in for repairs and maybe a refit, or, maybe they'll just, buff it out with something in the future. Probably in the Gulf somewhere.
Little Bondo will fix it right up.
Man, they're just going to go out there, man, with their thumb. They're going to lick their thumb and start, trying to rub the paint off of the side of the ship. But the Fleet Auxiliary, TAOE 6, is still going to be operating within the area of the Caribbean, at least for the foreseeable future. Pretty neat, honestly, that it was able to just take that and keep going. Because if that was the Chinese, that if y'all remember the Chinese incident down in the Philippine Sea, they just literally creamed one of their Coast Guard vessels, and the bow telescoped in, and they had to go limp back to port and pretty much knock that thing out of action to go and literally rebuild the bow. This thing just tanked a whole Arleigh Burke just ramming into it, and it's still going. Pretty impressive. Moving on from that, though. Also, by the way, folks, we were able to find out that the reason why that happened was exactly what I was saying, is that the vessels got too close to each other. The Arleigh Burke actually ended up slipping into the supply ship's wake, And when it did that, the eddies and generally the kind of like the void that exists in that area actually sucked the Arleigh in, and that's why it ended up ramming the side of the other ship. So it was literally the exact same sort of a phenomenon that I was explaining with the RMS Olympics collision with the HMS Hawk way back in 1911. But moving on from that, we're now going to be moving on back into Europa and on into Ukraine, because it's time for me to show y'all how the Ukrainians have been beasting on the Russians over the past few hours. Moving us on into Sumy, we were able to see the 105th Territorial Defense Forces apparently doing something spicy. We were also able to see the Russian Keshe report as well. And holy moly, that is quite a lot of losses. Dang!
Damn, 0 Bobcats, so I didn't get nothing.
He didn't get nothing, but the Russians did get something. According to Miss Disa, keeper of the records, Russian losses on February 15th, day 1,453, troop losses are up while the average remains below 1,000. Drones, artillery, and vehicles are much lower than in recent days. According to the past 24 hours, 1,250 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed. We've also been able to see 6 APCs knocked out, along with 97 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 11 artillery pieces, 552 drones, 3 MLRSs, and generally, a pretty decent day. Not the largest day that we've seen in some losses, but the infantry losses were quite significant. Moving us on up north and into the area of the Kupiansk front, we were also able to see within Kupiansk that it appears that the 101st Guard Brigade of the General Staff was able to clear a little Russian position. A little Russian one with, a satchel charge.
Come out over there. We want to save your life. Think about your family. Throw your weapons. Take your hands up.
Oh, no, not the dubstep.
Slipping in that Chad music.
Man, you know what the Ukrainians like dubstep?
Why did they like it?
Because their big step was getting the dub every time.
Oh, that was a good one.
that was good right there. That was slick. That was smooth. Oh, look at them throwing that stuff in there, giving a little present. It's not even Christmas.
They threw in the birthday present. They said, "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday."
Here, have this tin of Sturströmming. Here, have some.
It's actually an anti-tank mine. Boom. There it goes. And here goes the building. Oh. It almost looks like the foundation was about to give way there. We now see them tossing in another one. A birthday present for the Russians. Courtesy of Uncle Zelensky.
They call me Unc because I don't play.
They call me Unc because when I was back on the block, I wasn't tripping. I was a straight shooter.
They call me Unc with the gambling problem because they say I got the cards, but really I'm not playing cards. I'm out here playing poker.
Some people be trying to say that I am corrupt and I'm stealing all of that money. No, I'm getting that bag, and what I mean is I'm putting Russians in body bags.
Oh dear.
That one was kind of a little morbid, but it's not wrong. I mean, can you lie? No. Oh, and they got him again. We see here that they're laying it down, which is nice to see. Moving us on from that and on into our next clip further on into the Pokrovsk area, we also get to see the Russians filming out some burned equipment in this area. You can tell that they're Russian because they have this little stupid Russia flag in their car.
They can use that to wipe their ass when they're done.
You see, this is the multiple different wipes that Russians have with toilet paper. This first one shows that they haven't eaten anything in days. The toilet paper's still white. The second one shows that they have dysentery. It's blue. And then the third one is that they're shitting, blood, so it's red. It's not a good time for them at all in any way. They're sitting out here looking at this all like it's shocking to them. But they should know that this is the way it is because it's been 4 freaking years. Moving on down the line and towards Svatove, we also get to see the Ukrainian 115th Mechanized Brigade taking its time clearing out some Russian positions. Here they go. Oh, just gotta get around that.
Watch out for that scrap of rusty metal, right? The tetanus disaster in the making.
the tetanusnator 9000. Like, man, like, and then you just immediately get rigor mortis from that thing. But we can see them lobbing grenades down in the basement. And now they're going
The
on.
Russians are hiding out in this dump. They're in here hiding out in the crapper.
The Russians, they run to places they find homey, like a dump, and then we go and get them out of the basement, because they like dwelling in basements.
I like how this guy sort of just moved the gun away when his comrades ran past. Like he just kind of like zipped it to the other side.
He's just like, I don't want to flag him for too long. Oh, there goes a part of the building. Oh, that looks like a lot of the building. Ooh. Well, that's the end of that clip. And moving on from that and on into our next clip further on down, we also were able to see near the Lehman area, Russian forces getting hit here as well. Oh, we're going to have to mute the Sigma Male music, but we can see them landing a Sigma Male shot on this Russian dugout, on this mortar. And another one. Bink. And maybe even another one. Ooh. And perhaps even a fourth one.
This thing's carrying a huge fiber optic barrel or something on it. It's got a massive payload.
It's carrying what we call a large bomb. It's a... Oh my god, that's a lot of them. That's a lot of bombs.
Oh man, shouldn't leave those out in the open. That's not smart.
Whenever the Russians leave their mortars unattended, we like to touch them with the drone.
But moving on from that and on into our next clip further on down the line, we also get to see down in Chasiv Yar, the Ukrainians are holding a little bit of ground. From what we've heard, they're still holding ground in the Chasiv Yar area, and we've generally known that for a while. They say that the situation is a little difficult in that area, but it's been difficult for about 8 months now. Moving on from that and down to the Pokrovsk area, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russian comms in the 38th Separate Marine Brigade. This clip isn't too long. It just shows a little bit of the work they're doing. One comm system.
Whatever comms they got left, this is it. Like the pain. Now when they take one of these things out here, they literally have no alternatives at all. No Starlink, no nothing.
We don't even have telegraph. We used to have telegram. Now we're having to set up a telegraph.
I heard they're going back to smoke signals.
Man, dude, I heard that the Russians are nothing but a smoke show, so that ought to be easy for them.
Oh, you think they look good?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I thought that was not what smoke show meant. I thought smoke show meant something
smoke
else.
show means like you're talking about like something that's like looking good or something like that.
Let me rephrase that. A smoke and mirror show. I think that would be the right thing
Diddy?
you're looking for. No Diddy. No Diddy. Like, Man, I'll tell you, man. But moving on down to the southern front, we also get to see down here the Russians getting smoked by the Phoenix unit. Uh-oh. That's a whole buhanka full of Russians.
Oh, Miss Diesel said maybe they'll go back to pigeons.
I don't think I'll approve of them using pigeons. Listen, I'm here with the Secretary of Health to tell you that your health is not going to improve if you use pigeons as a messenger. I'm going to beat the hell out of it. Anyways, we see the Phoenix unit here, making sure to lay it down low on the Russians. Oh, look, that little car down there is cooked. Actually, that's a grad launcher. They're about to cook it. Uh-oh. По-русски солдат. Boom. Oh, there we go. It's roasting like a nice open fire. Oh. Get it again, Vadim. They love showing those vehicles on fire. They always love to give the clear proof that they really did hit the vehicle and cause a lot of damage. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear today something funny. The Russian Ministry of Defense has claimed that they're actually gaining ground. The Russians claim that they have taken today Primorsk, Mohyl-Danivka, and Zapazny. Right now, the front's about 4 or 5 miles from most of these towns. So they have not taken these. And the Ukrainians are actively pushing them back in this area as well. So not really that realistic. But the Russians, they continue to insist that that is the case. We also were able to see a little MiG-29 of the Ukrainian Air Force returning from a combat sortie over the Dnipro. Take a look. Oh, beautiful.
Oh, look at that. A sortie.
Man, look at that, the beautiful.
I just
But
want to get a smell of the exhaust. Like I just want to get a smell. Like can you imagine that thing going by that? Oh, it smells like aviation fuel. Probably smells fantastic.
man, it probably smells great. Like grade A fantastic, probably. But moving on from that, it is time for us to get on up and into the area of Kyiv to cover the speech from the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1453 of the news from around the world. It wasn't an incredibly long speech, but it was a good one nonetheless. And so with that, Peach!
Speech!
Шановні українці, українки, вже в Києві після 2 дуже насичених днів на Мюнхенській безпековій конференції багато було зустрічей. Найважливіше будуть нові пакети підтримки для України. Головне – ракети для ППО, для захисту від балістики. Це питання номер 1 протягом всієї цієї зими. Ви про це знаєте. Тому ми говорили про це в Мюнхені фактично з кожним лідером, які нам можуть дійсно допомогти. Також з Марко Рубіо, американським держсекретарем. Сподіваємось, що домовленості спрацюють так, як потрібно. ППО – це щоденна потреба. Я дякую ще раз Німеччині. Є наше нове виробництво ударних дронів. Будемо розширювати надалі саме такі речі, спільні розробки, спільні виробництва, загальноєвропейські програми та фінансові інструменти. Немає сьогодні в Європі лідера, який не говорив би про необхідність значно більшої незалежності Європи, значно більшої самостійності для Європи і самостійної сили всієї Європи. Це зараз одна з найголовніших тенденцій. Ми пропонуємо конкретні речі, конкретні проекти, які роблять Європу сильною. Наступного тижня ми очікуємо зустрічі та роботу заради нових енергетичних пакетів. Це стосується і відновлення після ударів необхідного обладнання. Я хочу подякувати кожному, хто вже допомагає. Попереду знов кілька холодних днів. Усі вже бачили, як росіяни цим користуються. Будь ласка, бережіть себе, реагуйте на повітряну тривогу. Ми в комунікації з усіма партнерами переконуємо, що кожна така загроза, кожен такий ризик тільки погіршують загальні можливості закінчити цю війну. На тижні мають відбутись тристоронні зустрічі. Українська делегація має необхідні рамки для розмови. Вчора ми скоординувалися зі Стівом Віткофом і Джаредом Кушнером. Україна завжди буде конструктивною. Американська сторона знає це. Але українці мають бачити реальний прогрес з безпекою, щоб була достатня довіра і до процесу дипломатії, до можливих результатів. Загалом, саме в питанні безпеки, ключ до закінчення війни. Гарантії безпеки для України потрібні. Це ключовий пріоритет. Ще одне. Ми готуємо новий санкційний пакет щодо російських осіб, які працюють на війну і ставлять спорт на службу війні. Документи вже підготовлені. Цей український санкційний пакет має бути сигналом для інших у світі, сигналом, що не можна просто заплющувати очі на підтримку агресії. Коли українці на Олімпіаді забороняють навіть згадувати жертв російської агресії, то це точно глобальний відкат від справедливості. Ми будемо відновлювати справедливість. Указ щодо санкцій незабаром. Слава Україні!
And with that, that's the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1453 of the news from around the world. And of course, folks, we're going to be moving on into the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it going to be an absolute blast. We can talk about literally anything and everything. And of course, we have much to talk about. Except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. Those topics are off the table. But we can talk about quite literally anything and everything else. And I'd also have to say, folks, that sadly our friend in the Air Force, the Major, is going to be very displeased because we are now watching all the U.S. aircraft flying on over Nova Scotia and also Newfoundland at the moment. And also notice, everyone, oh my God, after they make it out of national airspace of a country, it's like they turned their ADS-B transponder off. Wow. That's crazy. Wow.
Why is that, by the way? Do you know why that is?
That is because they probably are flying over an air corridor in this area, meaning that there's no oncoming traffic, and also considering that they don't have to follow any national aviation regulations over that airspace, they can just shut that thing off. If I'm assuming correctly.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. That's not the right answer, actually, right there. That
Oh,
is wrong.
what?
The answer is it's a lot simpler than that. There are no ADS-B receivers in that area because there's no ground to base the receiver on. So you can't track them on ADS-B for that reason because there's nothing to bounce the signal and report it back to the server. So that's why you don't see it. If an aircraft goes out into the Gulf, for example, you'll rarely ever see it there unless there happens to be an ADS-B receiver nearby. So that's why.
But Matthew, all these aircraft, they're ADS-B.
It's predictive.
Oh, you're right. The whole time, man, I thought that it was what I was thinking, and I'm wrong, apparently. Look at that. Look at that. Would you believe that? Would you believe that? Would ya? Oh, look, a United flight. What else do we have? Delta, Air Canada, United. You know something that's crazy, Matthew, is that basically no American air carrier owns anything bigger than a 787 these days. Like, it's very rare if they do, and they really don't want to own them if they have anything bigger than the 787.
Yeah, it's just they're just too big.
Oh my God! Look, United Airlines 82 just took like a Mach 9 beeline in the middle of the aircraft. Like, oh my God, man, United's flying wild up there. I'm just kidding, by the way, because we have to make sure that we say that clearly, but. Where's the military? There we go. There's the military flights again. That's really interesting, though, man. I didn't know that. I thought that they could just turn them off over that area, but apparently not.
No. And the only way we're able to see this information, by the way, is because Flight Radar 24 and also any other ADS-B exchange out there, what they do is they give out ADS-B receivers. You can actually apply for one on Flight Radar 24's website, I believe. I think they still have that application open, and you can set up your own receiver, so that way you can help to expand their coverage on their map. So the only way we're able to see this information is because it's a crowdsourced network of receivers. That's it. Other than that, we wouldn't be able to see it. It would be completely blind for most of the public.
That is really interesting, actually. That is actually incredibly cool. I wonder what's flying around the Salt Lake area right now. I wonder. Oh, let's see. What do we have here? We have this little... What is a Rand's S-20 Raven?
I'm not totally sure what that is, to be honest. Never heard of it.
Let me pull that up. I'm interested. Rand's let's see, 20 Raven. So it's like a little bush plane. That's actually really interesting. Look at that.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like a Piper Cub.
Yeah, it kind of is. That's really interesting. I didn't know about that one. I don't really know a lot about the bush planes. And then we have this American Airlines flight that's flying from Dallas to Seattle. And then we have this little Cirrus Vision jet that's flying over the Great Salt Lake. And then we also have, let's see here, this Delta Airlines flight that is flying to Salt Lake City, and it looks to be late, maybe. So that's interesting. And what do we have up here? Oh, this one just took off from Salt Lake. What do we have on the ground? I'm interested in that. Oh, dang, look at this, dude. Look at all the aircraft lined up waiting to take off. An American Airlines flight, a Delta, another Delta, a United Airlines flight, and a Delta flight. Dang, that's crazy.
Man, I love it. I love it when they get right there on the runway and they throttle up and stuff like that. And it feels like a little mini version of a roller coaster ride. I love it. I just love it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And there's this JetBlue flight. Y'all actually notice that most of the aircraft here are Delta flights, and that is because the Salt Lake City airport is actually a Delta fortress in the domestic aviation world. Delta pretty much controls, I think it's something like 80% of all of the flights in and out of Salt Lake City, and only 20% of them are from other airlines. And that's also why, if you ever look around Salt Lake City, you'll find a lot of stuff that Delta's put their money into, like, for example, the Delta Center right here. And also, I think that this Museum of Contemporary Art and all this stuff over here is kind of like funded or at least like helped out or sponsored kind of by Delta. There's a lot of Delta stuff in the city, which is really interesting. And it's actually kind of cool about that because the Federal Aviation Administration doesn't allow for an aircraft carrier to have a complete monopoly over regions of the United States, but they never said anything about them not having a complete majority in specific airports. So every major airline, the legacy ones like Delta, United, and also let's see, American, they all have their fortress hubs in America to where they basically have eked out the majority stake, like over 80% of all the flights are theirs, and everyone else is basically fighting for a couple of gates at that airport. But they can't have 100% of them, though. Also, by the way, just to add that, because if they ever take 100% of all of the gates at an airport, then the FAA might step in. So then they have to allow some other aircraft to come there from other airlines, so that way they don't have the FAA trying to regulate everything with the NTSB and all that, and then telling them that they have to break up the monopoly that they have over an airport. But it's really cool stuff, like how airport politics and like airline politics and business all work, and how they have to manage it within the law, but they also try and find the loopholes. It's really interesting stuff. But anyways, with that, I hope we've addressed that well. A little interesting side note there. But it is time for us to get on into some questions. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So also shouting out the rest of our top donors we've had so far, we're now sitting just over $3,000 raised. So we are officially well above the goal at this point, and a huge shout out to the LSA for making that possible on another Sunday in the middle of February in 2026. And a shout out all of our other top donors. We did have a 333 come in from Hal Rose. That makes that the largest one of the night, and a huge shout out to Hal for that massive generosity. Also a big shout out to Old Warrior Fellow who threw in that 70, along with Greg Carrier who threw in a 50, and that is actually all of our top donors as the last time. So once again, a huge shout out to all of y'all top donors and everybody else as well that threw in any amount of support to the fundraiser, because y'all all helped us to reach that massive goal that we had tonight once again. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a humongous thanks to everyone who has supported this fundraiser, including the folks we were able to call out and the folks that we weren't able to call out. Every single one of y'all makes these fundraisers a reality. And we've got to congratulate y'all and thank y'all greatly for that, because y'all are helping to save lives overseas, which is really the most important thing that comes out of these fundraisers every single Sunday. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next ones. The questions, that is. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our super chats first, but believe it or not, we actually got some super chats tonight on Sunday, which is usually not the case, but we do appreciate those super chats nonetheless. So jumping into our first one here, this one goes to ARP Bob, who put in a massive $200 super chat, and a huge shout out to ARP Bob for that absolutely massive support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Bob said, "Good evening, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, and here's a special gift to celebrate the birthday, and praying for the freedom and independence of Iran, Venezuela, and Ukraine, and long live the LSA."
And long live the LSA, ARP Bob, and thank you for the unbelievably massive support. And on my birthday, no less. I thank you so much for the massive birthday present there. I'm very appreciative of that. And have a good evening to you as well, and I hope you're doing well. And I hope that one day Venezuela, Iran, and Ukraine for Ukraine, it will always remain free and independent. And I hope that Venezuela and Iran will be able to see that independence some days eventually graces their shores. And I got to thank you massively for that unbelievably humongous support. This is amazing to know that people are always elated that it's one of our birthdays, and today is mine, the 15th of February. The 15th of February, I tell you, folks, that's something else right there. You know, it's the day after Valentine's. So funnily enough, my birthday is always kind of like, has always been an afterthought of Valentine's, because it's literally the day right after. But I'm still fine with that, and it's become an unofficial Enforcer channel holiday as well, which I think is really cool, because we go straight from Valentine's to my birthday, and then really nothing else up until about the 4th of July or so. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and a humongous thanks to you so much once again for that unbelievably incredible support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Jack Ray, who put in a $100 super chat and did not leave a comment, however, but we appreciate that nonetheless. I was trying to go back and check and see, and to make sure there was no comment, and I realized that YouTube doesn't let you do that on a Sunday night fundraiser stream, so it's quite interesting there. But a huge shout out to you, Jack, for that massive generosity as well, and the super chat. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that we're always greatly appreciative of folks like you helping to make this channel possible, and I thank you so much for that support. And I thank you so much for enjoying the channel enough that even on a Sunday night fundraiser you would support the channel and help us to keep this thing rolling. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, it is time for us to just about move on to the next one. But before we do, I actually found this really cool little map right here from Facebook that actually shows the little airport hubs for the companies, the legacy airlines. And funnily enough, Salt Lake City, which is basically the only one in kind of like the centrally located area in the western part of the United States, this is a Delta hub, but Denver is United Airlines hub, and American Airlines does not have a hub within a centrally located area in the west. The closest one they have would be Phoenix or Dallas, which I can tell y'all, having flown on American Airlines a lot, you go to Dallas a whole lot. Like, basically everything goes to Dallas. Or you can go to what I would describe as the unequivocal hell of Charlotte International Airport, which is truly a hell unto itself, because they have literally no way to get around this airport. They have none of the little speed walk things. They have no trains. They have nothing. You just have to leg the whole thing. And that is really something. Because the last time we did this, we had to get all the way from gate A over here to gate E all the way down here. And that was hell. It truly was something. And so I got to say, also, 1 second, folks. Matthew apparently can't hear or see anything. He's blind. I don't know what's going on with that. Let me see if I can fix that here really quickly, folks, by bringing him back on the call. Hello? Hello? Is it me? It's still connecting. That's weird. Maybe Discord's having a little issue here. Oh, he's left again. Let me see how this will work for me if I do that. And it's still connecting. That's really weird. It's really bizarre, folks. I do not know what's going on with that. So we're going to hopefully see if we can try and fix this here and troubleshoot this here in our last minutes. Let me just shut Discord down all the way, folks, and bring it back. Or I could join his call, and it's still not working. So we're just going to do this, and then we're going to turn Discord back on, and it's still connecting. Let's see. Let me just put this in right here. Discord broke. And hopefully we can try and find another way to get around this. So let me try and think here really quickly, folks. Give me just a second, and let me see if I can try and fix this somehow, some way, while we're on air, because I absolutely hate technical issues, and they absolutely drive me crazy. So give me just a second, folks. I'm going to throw the intro card back up here for a second so I can do some stuff here in the background, and hopefully I can get this back up and running. So give me just a second, and we'll be right back.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення великої страни. Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Sorry about that technical delay, everyone. For some reason, Discord just gave out on me. But he's back. Hey! And also, my screen. Yeah, I am screen sharing to you. Good. So, we are back. And before we move on to the next one, picking right back up where we left off, we actually have this interesting little map that has basically no fidelity to it of the different airport hubs, which is so interesting. Look at that, Matthew. Look at that.
That is fascinating, by the way. That is fascinating.
That is fascinating. Very cool. Salt Lake City, a Delta hub. I would have to say, folks, that going to Charlotte International Airport a couple of times, which is a American Airlines hub, ooh, wait. Do I not like Charlotte? I do not like Charlotte International Airport at all. It's very tough to get around, and I just don't know. I just don't really like the thing. You know what I mean? Like, it just don't make me happy. It's not an airport that I'm pleased with, because they got no way to get around it easy. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Born in Ukraine, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Born in Ukraine, for that generous support. They said, happy birthday to the one and only Enforcer Andrew, Costco Chicken Bacon Tuxedo Cake Fund.
And thank you so much for the support. And the Costco chicken bakes and the Costco chickens and everything else. I got to thank you so much for that incredible support and the happy birthday wishes. So huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Tom Exman, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Tom, for that support. He said, goal. And he said, thank you. And also, happy Andrew's birthday.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for wishing me a happy birthday. I'm very happy about having a happy birthday again. 24 years old. 24 years old. This will be the only time that I ever turn 24, folks. There's no going back now. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Alan Orchard, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Alan, as well. He said, happy birthday, Andrew.
Hey, and thank you so much for the happy birthday wishes as well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Aaron F90. And thank you very much, Aaron, for that 20. He said, happy birthday to you. When do you think the U.S. FPV program will realistically start to mirror Ukraine's model? The Army selected Dragonfly and mentioned on-base manufacturing, but the rollout seems a little slow.
I would say that American drone warfare is probably never going to get up to the speed at which Ukraine's is at right now, because we are just not implementing it properly from what I can tell. And there needs to be a lot more lessons learned from Ukraine, because they're basically trying to take what is mass production of cheap, inexpensive drones, and they're turning it into an artisanal, incredibly expensive, and slow to work process on producing drones on base, which doesn't work. And 3D printing doesn't work either, because everyone's like, oh, just 3D print them. No. That does not work. 3D printing is obsolete. You have to have injection molded frames, and the U.S. military isn't working on that. They're just going, hey, let's get 3D printers and try and make some. And it's like, you don't do it that way. It's got to be injection molded frames, because they have to be made quickly and in huge numbers. And it's not like 3D printing is like for like prototyping. You don't 3D print everything on a mass production level. You injection molded. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, in my opinion. And a big thanks to you for the support, and a big thanks to you for the happy birthday wishes. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $5 super chat from Bruce Lee, and thank you very much, Bruce, as well. He said, Ukraine to help the Ruskies with their loss of Starlink internet, free DSL for 91 more shady ships, drone strike list, another list you don't want to be on.
Oh, I'd agree. And I thank you so much for the support, and help this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Robbie A.R. Hey! Excuse me, goodness. Oh, man, that's a bad one there. That was on his but anyways, Robbie said, happy birthday. Kilroy was here. I guess that must be the Kilroy sign. I said, love both y'all and the marmot, and take one from the chat in LSA.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, and helping this channel to keep running. And I gotta say that we're very happy to have you wishing us a happy birthday and support this channel, helping to keep on running. And you know, the marmot, was there a mention of the marmot there?
He said he loves the marmot.
We love the marmot. We love the marmot. We really do. Sweet little critter. Sweet little critter. We love the marmot a lot. And so a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And that live chat question here. We have a live chat question we have to grab here. This one goes to none other than Cyber, who said, if there were mass protests amongst the Russian civilians, do you think that Putin would massacre the protesters like the Iranians just did?
Oh, yeah. If push came to shove, they would just start executing people in the streets in Russia, because that's generally how authoritarian governments run. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Par-Baked Potato, who said, happy birthday, Enforcer.
And thank you so much for the happy birthday wishes, and a humongous thanks to you so much for the support, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And I also see a lot of people asking for Alan the Marmot. I gotta be honest, folks, I'm not really feeling that great tonight. I've kind of been feeling under the weather all day today. Not like sick or anything, I'm just stuff. So like not emotional before anyone's like, are you okay? No, I'm fine. It's just I don't really feel
are you getting emotional?
But yeah, like I'm not emotionally, like I'm just like not really feeling that great, because I just woke up today and like physically I don't really feel too great. So it's kind of having a little bit of an impact on doing voices. And Zelensky's an easy one to do, but the Marmot and other ones, they take a lot of effort. And I don't really feel like having to go through that effort tonight, because it wouldn't really feel that comfortable for me. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, you want to show the people that cake you got, by the way? Yeah, I'll send you a picture of it on Discord.
Oh, you did? You did? Oh, well,
yeah, take a look at it. I took a nice picture.
Look
at that cake. Look at that. I said, a mama, he's got it caked up. I said, like, look at that. It's a real life cake right there. Look at that.
And look at that right there. And the little hunks of chocolate on the top are really cool. I thought that was really neat. Matthew, do you want to tell any details about this cake?
I didn't make it, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I mean, that's good enough for me. There's a really good one, though. It's actually a marzipan cake. We just got introduced to marzipan. It's basically pedophore, like coating is basically what it is. But it was really, really good. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Really cool little cake there. And also I see some people saying, well, what's wrong with you? Let's see. Not partying. No partying involved. I never drink. It's just that some days, I'll just be completely honest, some days I wake up and I feel like energy-wise almost completely spent, and it just kind of depends on the day. And before anyone asks, no, I don't have diabetes, and I don't have any other underlying medical issue that would make that a thing. It's just that some days I wake up and I'm just absolutely spent, and I assume that it's because we work basically on a 24/7 basis. Every once in a while, I just kind of wake up and feel kind of burnt out. So I just try and power through that the best I can. But doing voices that are really high effort, which crazily enough, a lot of them are high effort, like in terms of like the focus and the concentration, and also the amount of air that I have to push out of my lungs to make those voices work. It takes a little bit too much effort when I feel like this, and I'm like, I think I'm good. And I just try and stay hype, but not really do too much more than that. So with that, I hope that does address that well. In case you're all wondering what was up, it's nothing crazy. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I gotta say, that marzipan, by the way, I didn't know what that was until about a week or two ago. That is some good stuff. Like, I've never had that on a cake, but it is good. If you have a chance to try it, it's fantastic. Also, by the way, I'm glad that people have this impression. Some people are saying, dang, that probably only costs like $89.99 or something like that. It didn't cost anywhere near $89.99. I will admit that, by the way. I do go out for happy birthdays and holidays and stuff like that, but $89 for a cake, that's crazy work right there. That'd be a little crazy work. This cake wasn't like that, but it was very good though. Yeah, if it looks like that, I'm glad to see people have that impression of it. I like the raspberries on top, but I will say though, I simply told the folks, I said I wanted to say happy birthday Andrew on it, and I thought they were going to write it on the top of the cake itself. I didn't know they were actually going to put like huge chocolate chunks on the top of it like that, and actually write it in the chocolate like that. That was pretty cool. When I got it, I was like, oh dang, that's pretty sick actually. That's pretty good. But I think I was wanting the cake. I think I was wanting to eat the cake more than Andrew was, to be honest. I was dying to get into this cake. Well, once I got it, I was almost about to rip into the cake. I was like, I can't do it though. But I was like, I want that cake so bad. I had to let it sit in the fridge for a day, and I was just staring at it the whole time.
And I mean, it was great. It was great tasting. And then when we went out to let's see, it was the Pony Express Trail. Man, he was like, oh yeah, when we get back to the house, I'll have to like cut the cake up. I'll take a slice and I'll give you the rest. So I had to go to the restroom when we got back to his house, and when I walked out, he had taken like there was 2/3 of the cake remaining. He had taken a whole third of it. And honestly, I was kind of hoping that he would, because I'd probably get diabetes if he didn't. But like,
I was looking out for your health. That was all.
Yeah, clearly he was looking out for my health. But I made a joke to him in the car. I was like, man, when we get back, you're gonna be like that Looney Tunes cartoon where they like make the slice of the cake and then they take the whole cake. Let me see, Looney Tunes cake slice meme. Let me see if I can pull this up for y'all. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Man, dude, this is exactly what I was saying he was going to do right here.
Man. Man, I'm not gonna lie. I was slicing that cake up too. I was ready to give back some slices. I was getting ready to like put a couple back in the box. But I was like, okay, I'm like, look, this cake right here has got a lot of sugar in it. Like, I have a feeling this cake is loaded. So you don't want to eat too much of it. So I was thinking, the goal is not to take him out for the birthday. So we want to make sure we give him moderation here. So I was like, let me do him a favor and make sure we can cut down the medical bills. And I'll take a few back for myself to prevent any disasters from taking place.
Exactly. I mean, it was very thoughtful of him. And so with that, folks, we are on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to Cruder Dragon, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Cruder, for that support. He said, happy birthday. We're the same age now, the sane age, at 24. And also, since December. By the way, I don't know if you know, but Discord plans to lock all accounts as teens unless you verify your age with a face scan or government ID. Is that true?
I've actually heard about that. I think that is true.
I don't like that.
No, I don't like that either. We might have to find a different platform, like at least to talk through, because I don't really like the idea of that. Like, it's like I don't like that at all, because it's like, if minors shouldn't be on something like Discord, shouldn't that be up to their parents to parent their kids properly and make sure that they're not on something like that? Isn't that more of failing of the parent than the company, where the company basically has to like parent the kid? Like, I find that sort of stuff to be a little bit goofy. I feel like the responsibility with kids using the internet falls more so on the parents than the company. But that's not the way people think anymore, which I think is absolutely stupid, and I think that's just the excuse for lazy parenting. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, in my opinion. I think that's really dumb. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John, who puts in a 2. And John said, I had thought you were older than me, HBD. Happy birthday.
HBD. But big thanks to you. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I gotta say, we're greatly appreciative of folks like you and your support to this channel, and a big thanks to you for the happy birthday wishes. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And also, I just saw someone say parents can't control everything. Well, I mean, you can generally control your child's internet access, and if you don't want them creating a Discord account, you just make sure that they can't download Discord onto the system, and then they get around that, then you don't let them on the internet. That would be my answer to it. Because like everyone these days is always like, oh, parents can only do so much. And it's like, well, like if you take that kind of a mindset, well, then this kid's going to get up to a whole bunch of stuff. Like it's not up to a company to regulate your kid. Like if your kid goes into a Walmart, like it isn't Walmart's responsibility to basically deal with your kid while you're in Walmart, like that's really more so your responsibility. And so if they damage anything, that's on you. That's not on the company for not, supervising your kid and all that. That's really what I'm saying about that. And I feel like that applies to everything, because I really cannot stand how much these days companies have to basically put up guardrails for everyone, adults, kids, and parents with kids alike. Like, I find that all that stuff very annoying, and very much trying to parent everyone, and it drives me crazy. It's like, we grew up in a world where you were given this idea that when you grow up, you're generally responsible for everything. But then when we finally grew up, basically everything has guardrails on it now, to where you can't really do much of anything without even a company parenting you as an adult,
You gotta remember, these iPad kids. These kids, the parents, instead of buying a pacifier, it used to be like a pacifier. You go, give the pacifier to the kid, and they would chew on it and stuff like that and everything. But now it's like you give them an iPad, you hand the iPad to them, and that's like way more terrible than a pacifier. That's like way worse. And who knows what the hell they're getting on that iPad? Like I think they have like child locks on it and stuff like that, where you can lock them out of like pretty much everything but like approved apps. But I mean, that's just like terrible. Like putting your kids in front of a screen like that, so that way they'd be quiet. And they will be quiet, by the way, because they have unlimited entertainment in front of them. But the problem is, though, they're not being socialized like that, which is a major problem. They're also getting basically addicted to technology from an early age. And also, it's lazy as hell parenting. Like, it really is lazy. Like, I get the fact that most parents have to work these days. It's not where one parent can stay at home and parent the kids. It's simply not really possible anymore to have that. But I mean, that's not good. Like, that's not creating good children.
Yeah, and I also saw someone say, I'm a parent, and anything that can prevent a child from being coerced, bullied, or abused, I'm all for. You're obviously not a parent. I got an idea. How about you just don't let your kid on the internet? I mean, like, the internet really isn't a place for children, just to be kind of upfront, because there's all types of wackos and creeps and weirdos on the internet. I mean, that's like basically saying, I'm going to put my child in a den of predators and see what happens. Like, that's what happens if you've ever let a child have unadulterated access to the internet. And I'll be entirely honest with you, being a kid that grew up on the internet, I generally think when I have kids, they're not getting on the internet until they're very old. I mean, like maybe like 15 or 16 when they got some sense. But letting a kid onto the internet at like 10 or 11 years old, you're basically just saying, okay, kid, go out there like you're basically in the middle of a city street with a bunch of creeps and see what happens. Like, that's not a good idea. Like, that's never a good idea. So I don't really like the idea of like, oh, let's make sure that kids can be around God knows who on the internet, but with some guardrails. I mean, that still doesn't make any sense to me at all. Just don't let them on the internet until they're old enough. That's my honest assessment of it. And then if the kid tries to get around something like that, I mean, hell, that's kind of on the kid. Like, if you're in public, say, and your kid broke away from your arm and then ran off into the distance, and who knows what happened to him at that point, it's like, well, hell, it's like, at that point, you can only do so much. That's kind of on the kid for circumventing what you're doing to try and safeguard him. but that's my assessment. I mean, I grew up on the internet. I know what the internet's about. I was around when the internet was just starting to become really a huge thing, and that's like just letting a kid on the internet at all around
Oh
strangers that you
man.
can't see their faces or anything or even know who they are and who they're talking to. That's just a bad idea no matter how many guardrails you try and put up.
Yeah, the internet used to be somewhat like the internet's always had like a Wild West side to it. It used to be really like the Wild West back in the day. Like I can even remember that still. I remember getting on the internet way back in the day. And when I say way back in the day, I mean like 10 or 15 years ago. An entirely different world, like it completely different. Like it used to be a lot more wholesome back in the day, like where it wasn't just full of debauchery. Like these days, it's like, it doesn't take too far or too many clicks to get to debauchery. Like on the internet these days, it gets pretty bad. But back in the day, though, it was very simple times. And also, you didn't really have, the type of like real time access that we have today. It was more of like, forums and things like that. It wasn't like instant messaging. Like, I think they had that in some places, but it wasn't like all over the place. It's gotten really sketchy. Like today's internet is not the same place.
Yeah, I would have to say, and I see someone continue. I see the same person saying, "Yeah, you not understanding people, even kids will find a way, even if you don't allow it." Well, and then that's on them. Like, it's like you can only do so much, but my general rule would be don't let them on it. Because no matter where you go and where you try and say, okay, that's fine for them to go on Minecraft, there's creeps on Minecraft, they literally hang out in servers to try and prey on kids who are on Minecraft on a Minecraft server. So probably not a good idea to let them onto public Minecraft servers at that age. No matter where you look, the thing is, the problem with the internet, especially with children, is that they will be exposed to stuff they shouldn't be exposed to no matter how hard you try to prevent that. Because I remember that we would be in like Call of Duty lobbies and stuff, and if you ever got on multiplayer, you would hear every single racial slur under the sun and anything else. And then as soon as they heard that you were young, they would start trying to expose you to definitely stuff that you shouldn't have been knowing at your age. Like
I
all
never got
kinds.
on there.
Like, well, I did a couple of times, and then I got off of it because it's like this is not what you want to be around. And it's that kind of a deal where no matter how hard you try, there's I don't think this person is getting this, and this is what I'm trying to get to. That's boiled down to it. People on the internet, you don't know who they are. If you meet someone in person, you can look at their face, you can look at their mannerisms, how they talk, what they think. You can generally get a read on them and who they are. On the internet, people are just simply a little line of text with a name and a profile picture that doesn't even really represent most of the time who they are. So that person could be anyone. I mean, that person could be a deranged serial killer that's running that profile, and you would have no clue of knowing, no matter how many safeguards you put up. And they know how
Hell, it could
to,
have been Epstein.
huh?
Could have been Epstein.
Well,
He was
yeah,
on there.
yeah, it could have been because he was on there too. I mean, it's like, so the best idea is just not to let kids on the internet and not really to let them on a lot of electronic devices until they're old enough to really kind of police themselves in that way and kind of know what to do and what not to do. Or really, to be honest, just wait for them to be old enough that that's more so their issue than yours. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
But
True
anyways,
that.
true that, true that. But with that, we were on to the next one.
All right, so jumping in to our Morse code decoders of the night, we have Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arable Garba, Heroic Leftenant Coach Kobe Terry Siren, Brian Blairstown. They said the Morse reads, it looks like fires are more common after Tehran ran out of water, and it has nothing to do with water, LLC, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. It's the same one as last night. Sadly, I wasn't able to update that one tonight because I was kind of running late on time trying to make the thumbnail. But I do congratulate y'all for getting that correct again, and it's truly amazing and incredible. And with that, folks, it's time for us to get into some live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And our first live chat goes to none other than Leap, who said, did you see the first batch of AI drones delivered the Ukraine GER factory?
I didn't, unfortunately, so sadly I'd have to declare ignorance on that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question here from Cedric, and Cedric said, how much ground have the Russians lost since Starlink was taken out?
They've lost about, from what we've heard, it's roughly around 100 square miles of ground, I believe. But that's a very rough estimate, so I can't tell you exactly, but that's what we're thinking the running number is currently. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, this number apparently just came out, the updated fatality ratios in the war in Ukraine. For every single Ukrainian soldier that is eliminated on the front lines, 27 Russians are eliminated. That's a very bad ratio, by the way. That's literally the definition of a meat grinder. So just picture that. How big is that? Like 27 soldiers. I mean, is that like what is that? What's the size of that unit?
That would be about a platoon.
Yeah, so apparently every single Ukrainian soldier takes out about a platoon before a Ukrainian soldier is taken out.
Man, damn, when the Russians take out a Ukrainian soldier, they must feel like they got a unicorn at that point. It's literally taking like 30 of their guys to get one Ukrainian.
That's insane. That's really, that's wild.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, those sorts of ratios are that's a ratio that clearly shows there's a winning side in this conflict currently, which would be the Ukrainians. Because if you were inflicting 27 killed for every one of your killed, that is an unbelievable ratio. I mean, that's almost unheard of in most conflicts. Even in the modern day, on a very one-sided sort of a conflict, that's usually very hard to hear about. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than One Visual, who said, do you think the Russian army will ever simply whip a U-turn and go march on Moscow?
One, I think the mutinies are going to become a lot more common. I don't know if they'll ever turn around and just march right on Moscow, but I have a feeling the Russians are going to start losing a lot more control of units on the front because a lot of them might start to mutiny, which is always likely. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And that also might be another thing the Russians are scared of right now, and that's why they're wanting everyone to get on Messenger Max, is so that way they can make sure to track any possible mutinies that might be growing, and whoever is a ringleader of a possible growing mutiny, they go and grab them and take them away immediately so that way they can't really create a mutiny and then put everyone else in line at the same time. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Kit Boga, who said, and this is not I don't think this is the hacker Kit Boga fellow, the tech guy. I think this is a different Kit Boga. But he said, a few nights ago, you mentioned that Ukraine beats 2 NATO platoons in a war game. My question is, what country were those NATO platoons even from?
I actually don't know. We just heard that there were 2 NATO battalions. And generally a NATO battalion or all NATO battalions are structured very similar to each other because they're basically supposed to be interchangeable like Lego bricks. So a mechanized battalion will always look like a mechanized battalion. An armored battalion will always look like an armored battalion. They all have basically the same structure. So all I generally knew is that I heard that there were 2 NATO mechanized battalions, and they went up against the Ukrainians, and I believe the Ukrainians had 2 mechanized battalions of their own, and then they ended up beating the 2 NATO battalions. So unfortunately, I couldn't tell you the country, but generally everyone is trained and equipped to about the exact same specs across the whole of NATO. So it would be a doctrine-wide standard, that sort of an incident would be, no matter which country was involved. But I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat is going to go to none other than, let's see here. This one goes to Cliff, who said, what do you think about the USA using Ukraine's Sea Baby drone tech to clear out any Iranian ships and or mines laid in the Strait of Hormuz?
Sadly, the Sea Baby really wouldn't be that useful for that because the Sea Baby can only go for surface targets, and mines generally are several feet below the waterline, so it wouldn't actually be able to take out mines per se, and it also wouldn't really have any ability to detect the mines to be able to know when to explode either if it was remotely detonated. So it wouldn't really be good to use against, say, a mine, but it would be good to use against, say, a boat or a ship. But the thing is that the Iranians really don't have a lot of ships that would be useful against. You would basically be sending one speedboat carrying a large bomb to hit another speedboat carrying 2 guys in a 50 cal. So at that point, you would probably just be better off using, say, a JDAM or a laser-guided weapon on those boats. Hell, you could even use Hellfires on them at that point, and that would be pretty effective. But I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've also got a question here from none other than Old Warrior Fella. He said, is Xi Jinping in China just posturing while he fights resistance from the princelings led by Zhang Yuzhao, or does he sense weakness as we hate on our allies?
I would have to say that generally at the moment, and also can you reread that again just to make sure I can get this question answered pretty good?
Yeah, he said, is Xi Jinping just posturing while he fights resistance from within, that Old Warrior calls the princelings, led by Zhang Yuzhao? Or does Xi sense weakness as we hate on our allies as the United States?
Generally, he's sensing weakness because he can kind of fight what's going on in China and also position China well in the international stage and do both at the same time. As long as he doesn't leave China, that's really the big thing. If it's unstable, he can't really leave because if he leaves, he might get ousted in his in absentia. So he can do both. And right now, I think he's trying to take advantage of the bickering and the rift that's happening in the West to try and further ensure the split. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a question here from Michael Skelton, who said, perhaps the attack on Moscow is connected to Zelensky's formal announcement of their drone-building pact that they just reached with Germany.
And that's possible. That's definitely possible. And we'll have to generally wait and see. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a question from Ulf Hedna, who said, why aren't we telling our companies in China to prepare to close shop and move to maybe Mexico or somewhere in South America? Also, happy birthday to you, Enforcer.
Hey, and thank you for the happy birthday wishes. And generally, the reason why is because we don't have direct control over what a company does. Like, if a company wants to offshore in China, we can raise tariffs on China, but we can never just command a company like it's a federal agency to pack up and do this. That would be well out of our realm of control. And if we ever tried to do that, and go ahead.
Unless it's for national security, and then they can compel them to do it. Only in that circumstance, at least from what I've heard.
Well, I mean, in that circumstance, but in most other circumstances, it would be pretty hard. And considering that these companies, like, just to be completely honest, these companies lobby a lot of people within the U.S. Congress and also the office of the president quite commonly, and, generally are the ones who funded them to get into their positions through their campaigns. So a lot of people in the Congress and anyone in the executive would never really be a big fan of ordering these companies to do something that might not be best for their bottom dollar, because that means that they might start to lose their campaign funding next time around, and they might get the beast of the media that they control to go against them and basically slander their reputation in the next election. So there really isn't a way to command them. You can kind of try and encourage them, but considering that so many of them are beholden to lobbyist money that's provided by these very same companies, it's really hard for them to issue ultimatums or not really ultimatums, but more so directives, and basically tell them they're going to do that like they're some sort of a subordinate agency to the federal government. So it would be good if we could do that, but not sadly, but
No, that would be bad.
yeah, fortunately, the U.S. government can't really command around companies like they're a federal agency. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one here goes to the original Nosferatu, and thank you very much for that support. It said, Matt, did you see Marco Rubio address that the United States were smoothing everything out with NATO, and what are your thoughts? I saw him speaking at that forum the other day. I saw him speaking to the folks. I don't know, because here's my thing, and I'm not trying to be political with this. Marco was an independent man before he joined the administration. The moment he joined the administration, he has a boss now, so he's not able to really do his own thing. So he may say that he wants to smooth things out. He may try to smooth things out, but ultimately, though, he's not the end decision maker. So I don't. We really have to look at more of the president's decision making, really, and I don't really see any real significant change in the president's attitude toward NATO in reality, and I just don't really see it changing. I don't think we're going to leave NATO, if that's the question, but at the same time, though, I don't think they're going to smooth it out either, because I think there's some deep underlying tension between NATO and the president, and I'm not really sure what that is, but there appears to be some tension. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to generally agree, and I'd also have to say that the president of the United States, and I'm not getting political here, but this is the truth, is wildly unpredictable, and basically it just depends on what side of the bed he's waking up on for his opinion to change on a group or a country. Like, for example, if y'all remember Petro from Colombia, for a while there, the president was saying, we're going to go down to Colombia and overthrow him because he's a crook and he's involved in cartel dealings and tradings and yada yada. He's a narco-terrorist, this and that. And then, out of the blue, Petro comes up here to the United States, meets the president, and then he says, great meeting with Petro, wonderful guy, great guy, and then all the problems disappear overnight. It's like we never said that the guy was a narco-terrorist or a crook or anything like that. It just completely disappeared. And it's like that on a lot of stuff. Like, if you watch anything with Russia and Ukraine, it's insanity how it'll go one day, Putin's the reason why the war is going, and then the next day, Putin really wants peace and Putin's a dove, and it's really Zelensky that's the devil. And it basically just flip-flops, literally depending on the day and the mood, who's at fault for the war continuing on, when it's, quite clear, based on the facts, the Russians are keeping the war going, no matter what the Ukrainians are trying to do to appease the United States to eventually meet the Russians in the middle. The Russians don't want to meet anywhere, and they want to just keep fighting until they completely win. And it's like that on a lot of foreign policy topics, because, one day we love the Chinese, and the next day we can't allow the Chinese to grow any economic developments in Canada. It's stuff like that. And so while Rubio, and I'll say this, Rubio I actually have a bit of respect for, because he's trying to handle a situation that clearly isn't in America's interest to distance ourselves with NATO and our major trading partners literally across the globe, and he's trying to soften things up that are said that are absolutely destructive, but at the same time, the guy who's making the destructive statements isn't really Rubio, so he just kind of has to go back through and try and pick up the pieces and put them back together before the other dude comes in and basically smashes the whole thing over again, and then he has to redo it once again. Because
maybe,
I mean, possibly, or he's just trying to, run interference. That could also be the case.
Yeah. Also, from what I've heard as well, and this is rumors. Like we obviously haven't heard Marco say this himself, so this is my speculation based on things I've heard from sources that claim to know what they're talking about. But of course, it's just speculation. It's speculated that a lot of the stuff we're doing in our own hemisphere of the world, like for example, South America, Cuba, Venezuela, Marco tends to have a bit of a personal interest. At least that's what I've heard. When I mean personal interest, like he has like a fascination with the region. So he kind of lends a hand to it a little bit and also kind of encourages it. At least that's what I've heard. Of course, if we could get, for example, Marco on here to actually speak his actual perspective on it, we would love that. But the odds of that happening is pretty much slim to none. I don't think he's going to come on here because, it's risky to do political interviews. It's risky to do any interviews of any sort when it comes to something on a sensitive topic like that. But at least I've heard the rumors that he tends to encourage activity in South America, which seems to be personally motivated based on his own personal beliefs. Because I believe he's from which country is he from, by the way? Because I see Diane saying his parents were both Cuban refugees. Is that true?
Yeah, I think he's a descendant of Cuban refugees. I think he's a first generation American citizen from his family, because I believe both of his parents fled from Cuba into Florida, and that's also why he was a senator from Florida, is because he was a senator for the federal district from the area of Miami. And so that's kind of why he has a prerogative, at least what people are explaining as a prerogative for American-based activities in foreign policy, which I'd have to be honest with y'all. I mean, like, I get that from a perspective, like a personal perspective, but at the same time, I really don't like people making decisions off of their personal preference in government, because there's more important things to deal with. I mean, like, it's unfortunate his family had to flee from Cuba because of the hardships there in the communist government and all, but, it's like at the same time, we have a lot of important fish to fry. Like me personally, me and Matthew are of British descent, but that doesn't mean that if I become the president of the United States, I'm going to prioritize British interests over everything else and every other thing going on in the world. I'm first and foremost an American, and at that point, I'm in the position of being the representative of 360 million Americans. So it's not really about me, it's really about all 360 million other people that I'm making the decisions for at that point. And so I really don't, when I hear that kind of stuff, it's like, if that was true, that he kind of has like a personal leaning or a bias to being interested in American or the America's affairs, it's like, I really don't like that, because it's more so putting personal interest over national interests, if y'all see what I'm saying.
Yeah, but every state secretary of state, everybody's involved in stuff like that. They always have their own personal like pet projects they want to work on. That's something that happens every single time. Sometimes it's about heritage. Like for example, in Marco's case, it's probably more about heritage than it is necessarily just being fascinated by the region. For other secretaries of state, sometimes they just have a fascination. Like there's been a lot of secretaries of state that have a very strange fascination with the way the Middle East works, and they want to get heavily involved into it. And sometimes it's led to disasters. like we've seen before with certain secretaries of state really getting a little bit dumb with their decision making, and also advising the president on what to do in the Middle East, and it leads to unfortunate circumstances. But I think in Marco's case, I think he is pushing generally for stuff to happen in South America, at least from what I'm guessing. It seems like it would make sense considering that he's a Cuban refugee from the sounds of it. That would make sense. So, it is what it is, but I just think they should probably look at it from an objective lens as if they possibly can, but that doesn't seem to be the way it's done anymore.
Yeah, also, I saw Tom Axman say not if his fellow citizens starve and the government is the same like Russia, Iran, and DPRK. But here's my counter to that: they aren't his citizens. He's not a Cuban. He's an American. That's something that actually really irks me a lot about people who come to the United States, is that they always act like they have a greater allegiance to wherever they're from, more so than the country they now live in. Like, me and Matthew, we're British descendants, but our descendants came over to this country 250 years ago. So does it really bother me too much what is going on domestically in the UK? Not necessarily. We have a lot of bloodline connections to the United Kingdom. We're 90% British, but I'm not a British citizen. I'm an American. And there's a lot of different Americans in this country. There's Americans that are from Iran. There's Americans that are from Ireland, Italy, France, Germany, China, Japan, South Korea, literally every corner of the globe. There's people from Niger, from South Africa, from Argentina. I mean, there's people from all over. And when we get into a position in the government, we're not we're not trying to progress America's interest by going, my family was once from Cuba, but I'm now an American, so I'm now going to focus solely on basically making Cuba my pet project. Like, I don't like that, because there was a group of people that we knew that were from Lebanon at a point in time a couple of years ago. And they would always talk about how they really liked America, but then whenever it came down to it, they basically throw America aside to basically go root for the Lebanese cause. And I just don't like that, because it's like, so we're basically going to pilot this country for Lebanese interests, basically as a giant mech suit for Lebanon or Cuba or whoever, instead of it representing the interests of all Americans, no matter where they're from or who they once were. They're all Americans now of this soil, and we should be looking out for all of their interests instead of the interest of a small collective country that's not the United States.
Yeah, it's the house divided. That's the thing that people always talk about, at least in the modern day context. That if you have a house divided like that, where people's loyalties are split between, like, for example, their country of origin and their new country, which is the United States, you're going to have a very bad outcome, because you have to either be all in or all out. Like, you can't be half in, half out. Like, that's not the way it works. You have to be loyal to the country that you're a citizen of. Honestly, I've heard this debate recently. Some people have been debating dual citizenship. I think they're debating actually trying to get rid of that, actually, where you have to either be a citizen of the U.S. or not. At least I heard that. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I'd heard some rumors about that. I'm not really sure how I feel about that, to be honest, because I know some dual citizens that are generally objective for the most part, and they recognize that even though they hold a citizenship in their home country, they're loyal to the United States through and through. But there are people, though, that are not really sure about their loyalties, like, that are dual citizens like that. They're not really very clear about where they sit on the situation, and that can be problematic, I will admit. So I'm not sure what my real answer would be to whether or not you'd abolish dual citizenship or not, but it certainly probably warrants a second look.
Yeah, it really does. And here's another thing that I'd say, like, some people are like, well, people who fly Mexican flags. I'm fine with people liking their cultural roots. Like, say if the German descendants want to have Oktoberfest in Wisconsin and they fly German flags around there, or, say the Mexican immigrants that come to this country want to fly a Mexican flag at a Mexican holiday, like, say Cinco de Mayo or Dia de los Muertes. It's like, if they want to do something like that, that's a part of their culture. That's totally fine, because America is a melting pot of cultures, after all. But where I have the problem, though, is that where they take that and they basically imbue themselves with the idea of, while I'm living in America, I'm basically just going to use America as an instrument of change in my own country, whether it's to the detriment of the United States or not. And that's where I really find an issue, because if you're an American citizen, your primary interest now is the best interest of the republic and its citizenry, not where you came from. Because you're no longer, say, an Israeli or a Mexican or a German or a Frank from France. You're now an American. And so your decision should be in the best interest of the nation. And that's that's kind of where my issue lies. And I don't really like that when I see that in other countries either. Like when people get elected in, say, the United Kingdom, and then they want to try and support the United Kingdom's heavy involvement in Syria, not for British interests, but, you know, for the interests of Syria. It's like, I don't understand that at all. I don't like that, because it feels like it's basically just using the might of the United States of America and the toil and labor of the people who are working to eventually see that their government helps them out, and then basically using all of those resources and effort to go help out a load of people that aren't even in the United States. They're not even U.S. citizens, and the actions might or might not end up benefiting the United States at all. Usually they end up being to the detriment of the United States at our own expense. And that's what I just find a great issue with. And I also find that issue with people who do that for personal gain as well, even if it isn't for an allegiance to another country, where they just do things at the expense of the United States for their own personal gain. I find that to be a huge issue as well, because like, and to wrap this up here, because I see Matthew putting in the little yappers emojis in the chat, but beyond that,
Man, it's a dinosaur, man.
Man, I thought that was a yapper, man. Like I was like that looks like a yapper. But to wrap this up, if you are a representative of the federal government or a state government to any capacity, if you are a state official, your primary and sole interest should be the benefit of all citizens of the state, or it should be to primary interest to all citizens of the United States of America, regardless of personal bias or personal opinions or thoughts. Any decision should be at the best interest of the republic, and that, in my opinion, is final, even for myself, if I was to become the president or a senator or representative, say. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a $2 super chat. And thank you very much, Bruce, once again. He said, happy B-Day, and my oldest turned 8 today, too. And also, happy birthday to your son. He said, quack.
Hey, and happy birthday to him. And a big thanks to you so much once again for throwing that in. And thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
So back to our live chat questions here. We have a question from Enforcer Crow, who said, do you think that Russia is still planning an invasion into Poland or any other neighboring country? Or do you think they have been too much worn down by Ukraine to open another front?
I think they're going to look at opening another front as a desperate last-ditch attempt. But it's probably not going to be here soon. It's probably going to be towards the very latter end of this year, or it might even go into next year, which would be much to my dismay at this point. But with that, I hope that is addressed the best I can. And with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and our next one, it goes to none other than, I was trying to type a response here, by the way, that's why I'm yapping, but this one goes to Hallowshotten, who said, I'm extremely worried about Western countries using the failed Merkel-Russia model approaching China when they blatantly ignore basic human rights, and it's the worst mistake ever. It is the worst mistake ever. The unfortunate part is, while I sincerely do believe the Europeans are making a grave mistake, including Canada, by the way, by going to China and basically courting China as a real viable alternative to the United States is not innocent in this, because they forced them to do it. Because Europe wants leverage just like any other country. So if the U.S. is basically shafting Europe and Canada, then naturally these countries are going to look for leverage, and the only place to look for it is China, or you can go to Russia. Russia's obviously not an option because, I mean, for obvious reasons, they're at war with a European country. So China is your only place to go. But the devil's in the details, though. Even though China is not at war with the West, they are actively facilitating war against the West. As many people have stated, if it wasn't for China sending dual-use goods to Russia, Russia would not be able to fight the war against Ukraine and thus fight the war basically against Europe as a whole. So China is as complicit. It's just not as obvious, but yet Europe is still running to them nonetheless, which is really dumb. But the U.S. is once again sort of pushing them to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's dumb, but at the same time, folks, everyone always has to understand that whenever you basically heavily insult and then try and cause damage to a country, even if they are allied, they're going to start changing their arrangements, because it wouldn't be smart for them to see that a country is basically abusing them at that point, and then they stick with them. And this is something that I found really interesting, is that people recently are like, look, we treated Europe like shit, and now they're turning against us. What allies are they? Well, what allies were we to treat them like shit in the first place, to make them second guess their arrangements with the United States of America? That's really where the question lies, because you can't ever demand undying loyalty from people around you and then treat them like crap, because you're never going to get undying loyalty from people or countries if you treat them like crap. That's why I was even saying on the show the other day, I was like, the reason why Puerto Ricans generally look at being a territory of the United States with disdain is because if you look at their island, the U.S. does nothing to help them out, and we basically just leave them in destitution down there on their little island. And that's why they generally find a great disdain of being a U.S. territory and they want independence, is because of that. If we gave them a reason to be loyal to the United States and we actually treated them well and then we demanded of loyalty of them, they would have loyalty to the United States, much like the rest of the actual 50 states of the United States do. But you can't treat allies in Europe as poorly as we have over really the past 4 years, and especially over the past year, and then not expect them to try and find some way to start exercising clear leverage against us. We have to always treat our allies favorably. They treat us favorably. We should be treating them favorably, and now make sure that this sort of a mutual arrangement exists into the future. But you can't always demand to extract every bit of value out of them and bleed a turnip dry, and then basically give nothing in return, because that sort of an arrangement will end quite quickly. Even if it's not in their interest primarily, they'll still end it, because they'll be looking at it and going, well, either we're getting screwed by the United States, or we're basically going to the Chinese, which is not as good at all if we were just to have a good arrangement with the United States, but it's slightly better than what the outcome with keeping with the United States might be in the long run. So that's what they're looking at right now. And as far as the U.S. position, it's not good for them to leave us. Like, I'm not really happy about that, but I also got to understand from their position with how we're treating them right now, they're looking at it as they really don't have another choice. It's either try and exercise this leverage and possibly even leave as a result, or they're just going to get screwed over by the United States indefinitely, which isn't much to their benefit either. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and this is actually our final question of the night. So, Enforcer, would you like to do the thing?
Oh, of course. And so we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is like last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Nick, who put in a $10 support, by the way. And thank you very much, Nick, for that support. He said, happy birthday to you, by the way, and happy birthday to you. And happy birthday to you, dear Enforcer. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And that has us singing on stream. And I'm not a singing man, Kathleen. I'm not a singing man. I'm not flamboyant, Kathleen. He's just flamboyant. He's a devil for the drink. He's a devil for the drink. But what say you, Enforcer?
I got to thank you so much for the support, Nick B, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that's a wonderful and incredible thing to know that folks like you support this channel and help it keep on running, even on my birthday, on a Sunday night fundraiser. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. And I've got to say that we are absolutely honored and greatly appreciative to each and every single one of y'all for watching this stream tonight. We had a peak viewership of 13.5 thousand people, and 118,000 people have watched the stream before it ended. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and if there is a short war video to be made tomorrow, I will be the one making that short war video. If there is not a short war video to be made tomorrow, then I will see you all on Tuesday, along with Enforcer Matt at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukrainian, Ram Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern to cover the rest of the news throughout those 48 hours that will be off the air. And of course, if there is a short war video to make, we will make one tomorrow, and the Enforcer will be the one to make it. And also, if there happens to be anything crazy that breaks out tomorrow that's unexpected, which we really don't expect it to happen tomorrow, then we will go live to cover that on an emergency war news stream, that is. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, you can keep up with us on our Twitter page. And of course, our Twitter handle is @It'sTheEnforcer. I almost forgot it there for a second, but we do appreciate that. And of course, also, by the way, a big shout out to the Secret Vault, who just put in a £5 donation right there and said happy Welsh birthday to Enforcer Andrew. So would you like to weigh in real quick?
And thank you so much for the Welsh birthday. We are Welsh. Hey! And so a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, I suppose it's time for us to round this thing on out. Matthew, take us on out.
Yeah, and back to me once again.
Whoa.
By the way, a big shout out to Raphael Saya. Raphael Saya just put in a 10 and said, happy birthday, Andrew Enforcer, LTLSA.
And long live the Lead Spring Army. And a big thanks to you for that incredible support. And now, Matthew, round us on out.
And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.